and their ancestors as the original people of Labrador. On behalf of the steering committee, the program committee, and our sponsors, I'd like to say how very deeply pleased we are to have you all here today. Our team has been working hard to get everything in place, and we hope the conference will be a great opportunity for you to share, learn, and reflect on public engagement. Before we proceed with today's official program, I would like to draw your attention to a couple of housekeeping items. We have a very full schedule, and so we're going to be holding people to the program with time cards. So I'll be sitting here for the plenary, showing our speakers our cards, and in everyone's session, your chairs will be doing that as well. So we really ask, in order to ensure an equitable distribution of time, that we really pay attention to those and stick with the agenda. In case of a fire alarm, please exit this room and head toward the main doors. That would be where you entered earlier this morning. Once outside, please muster at the far end of the parking lot. Washrooms are located on this floor through the door on my right. The gender-inclusive washroom is outside the center door. If at any time during the conference you have questions, please ask anyone sporting one of these yellow name tags, and if we can't help you, we'll be able to find someone who will. We'll also have staff on the registration desk until, I believe, Friday at noon, but generally if you come out and look for someone who's able to help, we'll be able to help you out. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce a true champion of public engagement at this institution, President of Memorial University, Dr. Gary Kachanowski.
Thank you, Sandy. I don't have a yellow card, so don't ask me anything. Would you please join me in thanking all of the people who do have a yellow card and all the work that they've done. On behalf of the entire Memorial University community, I'm delighted to welcome each and every one of you to our newest campus here on Historic Hill, Signal Hill, and of course also to the Emera Innovation Exchange. It's with its state-of-the-art meeting facilities and leading-edge connective technology that supports and helps encourage public engagement and participation from across the province, around our country, and beyond. To those who've traveled from various corners of our country and the world to participate this week, I certainly offer you a warm welcome to St. John's, our wonderful city. We brought the fog. We brought the fog in to focus you. And of course, our great province of Newfoundland and Labrador. I met a number of you last night at the reception. I really hope you did enjoy yourself. And while you're here, I do hope you get to see a bit more of our wonderful city and province. People, Place, and Public Engagement is the first major conference to take place here in our new facility, which of course is fitting given our vision and aspirations for a world-class venue to enable and support public engagement and innovation. And we certainly can't think of a more exciting and iconic location for the university and our extended community to connect and work collaboratively in areas of importance and shared interest. As many here know, public engagement is such a relevant topic today, though not particularly a new concept. If you look at the history of our institution, for example, there is a deep narrative of collaboration between Memorial and the peoples and organizations of Newfoundland and Labrador. However, the sort of broad acknowledgement of the value of public engagement that we've seen more recently in institutions and governments and funding agencies certainly marks a noticeable development compared to 20 or 30 years ago. The Carnegie classification system in the US, which documents and recognizes qualifying institutions as community engaged, and of course, the various Canadian community university organizations working hard to expand and enhance public engagement in this country are examples of the value that our post-secondary institutions place on public engagement. Here at Memorial University, an emphasis on public engagement is not an accident. It is not only part of our DNA, but a strategic focus of our institution. As Newfoundland and Labrador's only university, Memorial has a special obligation to the peoples of this great province. Our mandate, defined by the Memorial University Act, is not just to provide education to the people of this province, but to build sustainability and opportunity through social, cultural, and economic development. Our special obligation is also inherent in our university's unique origin as the Memorial University. We were established in 1925 as a living memorial to those Newfoundlanders who lost their lives in the First World War, in particular one large battle on July 1st at the Battle of the Somme, and of course rededicated also to subsequent conflicts. It was dedicated as a living legacy, signaling the desire for and pointing to the way to achieve a better future, not through confrontation and conflict, but through education and the discovery of new knowledge. And of course, we can't think of a better way to commit to and to continue to fulfill those aspirations of our founders than the creation of our Signal Hill campus. It's a campus that has been developed to operate as a truly provincial resource, supporting public engagement and innovation across Newfoundland and Labrador and beyond, including our Marine Institute campus, which is a full polytechnique integrated college through to university education, our Grenfell campus on the west coast of Newfoundland, our Harlow campus in England, just a little bit north of London, our Labrador Institute, and our other locations all across this province. And I think just recently announced, I want to put a plug in for our deep and growing relationship with Nunavut and Nunavut Arctic College, which we're very proud of. This place will connect Memorial and the public across a broad range of areas, from innovation and entrepreneurship to industry, community, and civic engagement, creating connections and facilitating deep collaboration on issues of provincial, national, and global relevance. In today's globally connected world, innovation occurs when talented people connect and interact and new ideas are generated. And we need talented people identifying and dissecting our challenges, and together with our extended communities, finding creative solutions to advance social, cultural, and economic development. And it's this sort of dynamic interaction that is at the core of how we understand public engagement and underpins our public engagement framework. Indeed, we are the only university in Canada, Rob keeps reminding me of this, with an academic Senate-approved public engagement framework. Our framework was developed through a highly consultative process across the province. It is an academic governing document of the university, placing public engagement along with, of course, research and teaching and learning as core areas of our work at the university. So, of course, we offer funding programs to support both fledgling and developing public engagement projects, and this venue will actually generate significant revenue to support public engagement. And we celebrate our successes every year with the President's Awards for Public Engagement Partnerships. We certainly believe that the future of Memorial University is deeply connected to the future of this province and vice versa. So we will continue to strive to be relevant, responsive to the needs of this place and the contributions of this place to a better Canada and a better world. As our public engagement framework states, a public university serving the public good. We're so pleased that you've all joined us here for People, Place, and Public Engagement, and I wish you all a productive and inspiring 3 days. Make connections, think broadly, and enjoy this beautiful venue, city, and province. Thank you, and have a great conference.
Thank you, Dr. Kachnowski. Next, I would like to introduce you to our conference Emcees. Sheila Downer has lived in Labrador for more than 35 years and is a strong advocate for the development of rural, northern, and coastal communities. Sheila has worked as part of a team throughout Labrador to build local knowledge, skills, and effective tools to support the way people live, work, and do business in northern communities, and has been actively involved in a wide range of community, regional, and international organizations. She currently works with Memorial University's Office of Public Engagement and Labrador Institute as a Northern Liaison, and also serves as the Vice President of Finance, Development, and Engagement for the University of the Arctic. Lisa Brown is CEO of Stella Circle, a community organization whose mission is to transform lives by offering housing, counseling, and employment services to adults who face many barriers. The organization has won numerous awards, including a Canada Volunteers Award for Social Innovation. Lisa was named one of the top 50 CEOs in Atlantic Canada in 2017 and 2018. In June 2018, she was appointed to the Board of Trustees of the National Gallery of Canada for a 4-year term. She participated in the Governor General's Canadian Leadership Conference in 2012 and has served as regional chair for Newfoundland and Labrador for the 2015 and 2017 conferences. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree and a Master of Business Administration degree from Memorial University of Newfoundland. Please welcome Sheila and Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. It's our pleasure to join Sandy and President Katjanowski in welcoming you all here to this very exciting conference. And it's, as President Katjanowski said, it's very fitting that one of the first events to take place in this wonderful facility is a gathering of people from all over the place to share, present, and learn from one another about public engagement. The organizing committee, who are all members that live and breathe public engagement, have done a wonderful job in putting together a great program for us for the next 3 days, and with expertise and perspectives on an international, national, and local level. And we'll be looking at all aspects of public engagement over the course of the agenda over the next 3 days. And we encourage you all to enjoy the conference, to relax, to learn, and certainly question and debate, and get to know one another as we're here for the conference over the next 3 days. And Lisa, I'm thrilled to be here sharing the MC role with you. And why don't you get us started with the program by introducing our first session?
Thank you very much. You know, you're smart organizers when they ask other people to come up and introduce the conference. So that's very clever. And we're taking a page from that book, and we've put together a panel of 5 people, and they know who they are. I'll ask them to start coming up to the stage now. And we've asked them to take a look at the program and set the context for the conference for us. What are your expectations? What are we previewing in terms of the conference offering? And so they each have 5 minutes or less to provide that for us. Now, Sandy is the timekeeper, but if you ignore Sandy, then you have me, and that should not happen. So we're thrilled that they've all agreed to tell us their perspectives. They will introduce themselves and then talk a little bit about their expectations. So we have Jennifer Adams, Alan Cram, Jody Lane, Peter Krajewski.
That's right, yes.
Believe it or not, I practiced it, so I need to practice more. And Christina Murray. Murray. Did I miss somebody? No, I got everybody. Okay, so Jennifer, we'll start with you, and let's hear about you and your expectations for the conference.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. And thanks, Sheila. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. My name is Jennifer Adams. I'm the Interim Director for Strategic Operations here at Signal Hill campus and for conference services here and on St. John's campus as well. So I'm thrilled to see so many faces here in this space that we've worked for a long time to bring to reality. So it's really wonderful to see it on its legs, and we'd love to hear your feedback, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I am really excited about this conference because it not only is happening in a place where I work, is also about a topic I'm passionate about, which is working with the public and the reciprocal relationships between the public organizations and the university. For those not familiar with all the Newfoundland and Labrador lingo just yet, the term maggoty is used in polite conversation, and it harkens back to pre-refrigeration days, and it does mean full of maggots. But it's used also to mean in abundance. And so I'm going to use it in a sentence now. The People, Place, and Public Engagement Conference is Maggoty with appearances from Jennifer Adams and her colleagues. So there's a number of sessions that I wish I could attend, but I'm going to be in other sessions and I'm going to tell you about those ones. So at 2 p.m. today, I'm really excited to be an observer and participant in shaping the path forward, methods to facilitate public engagement success. That's happening here at Signal Hill campus, downstairs in B1005. Louise Harris and Kathy Malcolm Edwards have really designed a beautiful participatory methods taster, basically, for participatory decision making. And we're going to do a method, and then we're going to talk about the method. So we hope to see you there for that. That's at 2 p.m. today downstairs. On Friday, I get the privilege of chairing a session with Mike Heffron and Sarah Woods. Mike is joining us from Australia, and he has completed a case study on the development of Signal Hill campus. And so he's going to share that with us. And then we've got a great panel. Sarah Woods from the Barbara White's Community Engagement Center at University of Nebraska in Omaha, as well as Ann Brown, who's the Associate Vice President of Facilities here at Memorial. We're going to have a dialogue about designing public engagement facilities and spaces, global lessons, and local applications. That's going to take place at 1 p.m. tomorrow in the staircase. So I don't know if you noticed that staircase, but it's seating on one side. And so that's where we're going to be. And at the end of that dialogue, we're all going to get on a bus and head down to the Neal Building with City Councilor Dave Lane. And he's going to tell us about that project in downtown St. John's. Then on Saturday at 9 a.m., I encourage you all to join us for First Steps, how to start and maintain a new public engagement initiative. Andrea Rose, Kira Galway, and Barry Roberts are going to be presenting on building community and learning together, the making of a Newfoundland and Labrador Choral Federation. I'm going to present on my master's research work, which was about developing collaborative interorganizational collaboration cultures. And that's called Thank You for Coming, Now Feel Free to Leave. And so we hope that you come to that. And Sean McGraw, and then you can leave if you want to. Sean McGraw and Kyla Bruff, they're going to present on For a New Earth, Our Vision and Its History. The chair of that session is Amy Jones, and that's happening downstairs as well. I'm about to get the hook, so please come and enjoy this or any of the great sessions that the others are going to talk about, but really come to mine.
Good morning. My name is Alan Cram. I'm VP of Innovation with Anaconda Mining in Bayvert, which is about 600 kilometers from here. And I'm delighted to be a part of this event. And I know the 5-minute warning is serious because I see rocks placed strategically around that I expect will be thrown this way if we extend on the 5 minutes. I've been involved in a couple of engagement sessions in Bayvert. Bayvert, for people who are not familiar, is a community of about 1,300 people. It relies solely on mining. And we had an event last spring where we brought in the university and college and the funding agencies and government support groups to get together with 3 of the active groups in the area, the mining companies, to brainstorm a little bit about opportunities. And I look at it as the innovation triangle, where we have the ideas coming from the industry, funding from the government source, and the science from the academic institutions. And in this province, Memorial and a college, there's about 27,000 students, somewhere in the order of 8,000 or 9,000 faculty and staff. That's a great source of expertise to join with our industry. On Friday, in the afternoon session, Stephen Butt and I will be co-presenting a project that we are doing related to mining. And Newfoundland's mining industry goes back 1,000 years in our region with the Paleo Eskimo and to Anaconda's operation, which is a relatively new, but is Newfoundland's longest continually operating gold mine. And so we're looking to really change that approach to mining, what people would visualize to be current in light of the green, low carbon, safe ways of doing business. And I think people will be quite surprised about the innovation that's happening in the province. And, Newfoundlanders, we can be the best in the world. And I can, share Caitlin Osmond or Brad Bushu from a province of 500,000 people to have the best in the world should be an inspiration for everyone in the province to work together to improve this. It is a great province. This was just designed for the backdrop for the focus on the screen. And when this is over, it's going to be really sunny. I'm from here, and I know this doesn't happen very often. So I'm looking to learn ways to better engage not only in the community, but within our operation. We have about 75 people. We don't think ourselves as being small. We join on many national events, and we participate, and we rub shoulder with some of the biggest mining companies in the world. But sitting around the table, we truly speak the same language. And I think that with the university and the college, we can do a lot of great things. And I'm looking forward to more ideas to bring back, to continue this engagement, to bring science to the site, to our mining site. And I think the model we started with last year, I think it can be modified somewhat to be used for any industry in the province, in a select area, because mining is very captive. And so it has to be done. And if you're going to research mining, you have to go to the mine. If you're going to research Antarctic, you got to go to the Antarctic. And there are people out there that really want to do that. So I'm looking forward to taking back some new ideas on how to engage the community, particularly, and the academic institutions. No rocks. Thank you.
Good morning. First of all, let me say it's a great pleasure to be among such a distinguished crowd. My name is Piotr Krajewski, and yes, I'd like to apologize to everybody who meets me in a hall who tries to say this. It does seem like a random allocation of letters. It's just, you can always say Peter, Pierre, or Pedro. It's all like local variants of the same name, so don't worry about that. And today at 2 p.m. With Sandy, our presentation is about statistics and stories. And given the fact that the conference is for people and the place, I'd like to share a short story of how a random guy like me from a random country, Poland, ended up on this remote island. And so yeah, so it was over a decade ago when I decided to leave Poland, and I moved to London, and I started to work in a company which opened one of the branches in Dubai, and they asked me if I want to move to Dubai. I said, oh yeah, of course, it's amazing. So I moved to Dubai, and after initial great relief of how wonderful the winters can be, I realized that I'm actually living in the desert, which is like a barren wasteland where there's no wind, there's no rain, no clouds, nothing grows there. So everything's fake over there, and that would probably be cool. I hope nobody's from Dubai to say that. And I realized that I just have to find something that is complete opposite of that. And so I did my research, and I found a great graduate program at Memorial University. And they did a research about the province that was here, and it was everything that I was looking for, which was not Dubai. And so I just decided, well, I'll just give it a go and see how it end up. And a year later, I landed here, and I actually lived in this building, just a few floors up. But there is graduates accommodation upstairs. So for those of you who just came, and it's the first impression of St. John's, it was very similar to mine. And even despite that, I get no regrets. It's a beautiful province with wonderful, authentic people, and I hope you have an opportunity to learn it yourself. about the interaction with people. And yes, even though on a day like this it might seem like it's not very welcoming, it still is the people who make up for all that weather doesn't give you. But it is a very warm province there. And just coming back to the conference, as I said, we are actually doing a session on statistical stories about evaluation and monitoring of public engagement. And it's a great session which actually shows you how Memorial University is unique in terms of establishing the public engagement framework, and established 6 years ago, and we actually did a bit of an evaluation. We spoke to people about the impact of this public engagement framework. So some of the findings you can find there, and also some other stories and other statistics which can help in actually promoting the public engagement. So it's definitely worth seeing. And there are also lots of other great sessions, and it's unfortunate that some of them, they're running concurrent, so you can't actually see all of them. But I'm actually looking forward to a lot of them. Some of them like citizen science with Oliver, some of them Stephen Bonstein about the public engagement and the health outcomes, and also with Josh Smee about the healthy communities. It all sounds great. And yeah, that's all. I hope you have a great time, and I'm sure I will. And yeah, I'll see you around the conference.
if you want to hear more about it, then come see me at 2. Thank you.
My name is Christina Murray. Hello. Hello. So my name is Christina Murray, and I am an associate professor with the Faculty of Nursing at the University of Prince Edward Island in Charlottetown. So like your island, our island is the lone university. So UPEI is the only university that we have. And I think it's a great gift and a privilege to be able to be part of our institution. As a nursing professor, to be a nursing professor, you have to always be a registered nurse first. So I'm a registered nurse. I teach in nursing. I serve on a multitude of committees, and I have a program of research that engages with families and communities who are experiencing labor mobility and being separated for long periods of time, for long distances. And so when we think about people, places, and public engagement, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be here to be able to hear and learn. I'm a one day only. I'm flying out tonight to go back. And so our presentation is at 2 o'clock as well today. We are with the On the Move group at the breakout session. And there you can come and learn so much about people who are studying, serving, and supporting families in regards to, and multiple issues around long distance commuting. So that's my first plug of my 5 minutes. Being part of UPEI, one thing that is very important to us is relationships. Our president, the last time I spoke with him, he said, all that we do is about relationships and friendships. And to me, I hold that very dearly. I am one who has engaged, collaborated my whole professional career, whether it's in practice or whether it's in the community. As a nursing professor, it's all about how we partner with others, how we work with others. So for example, I teach in a 4th year nursing course. We have 69 students and we have 61 community partners from tip to tip. And so we need to grow those relationships. We need to nurture them. We need to foster them. And that is one thing that we are very holding dear in terms of how we build, grow, and nurture our relationships with communities and community partners. In regards to the program of research that I'm involved in, I am a narrative researcher. So my doctoral program was at the University of Alberta, and I worked under Dr. Jean Clananan. So Clananan and Connolly is the method that I have been versed in. Everything about narrative inquiry in that method is about the relationship. It's about flattening hierarchy between researchers and participants. It's about being co-participatory. It's about understanding people and working in relationship with your participants. And so that has been the foundation for my doctoral work that I did exploring women's experiences of coming and going on Prince Edward Island, having a loved one leave. It has been what grew me to our Tale of Two Islands project. So we had a project that compared our islands of Cape Breton and our islands of PEI in terms of how long distance community is impacting families from an intergenerational perspective, from grandmothers to guys who are leaving to women left behind to multiple professional sectors who are impacted by this. And it helped us to grow because every person we've ever worked with has shared, I wish there was an opportunity for people to come together to talk about this issue and to learn and to grow. And so we partnered. And so we were very, very blessed with coming together with the On the Move project, with Dr. Barb Neese here at Memorial, with the Vanier Institute, with Norris Spinks. So we had this happen. So we brought 93 people together, families who lived this with practitioners. They came together and we talked about multiple issues that are impacting people. In terms of dissemination, I like to be out there. I'll do wild and wonky things to engage with people. So one example was a Research on Tap where I went to a bar and it was very well publicized in terms of come and hear about this research. People came, sat, had some beer, and listened to what we're doing in terms of our research. So partnering is everything. I am a nurse by practice, but I know that you can do nothing with people and for people without working together and with working with lots of different sectors. So my teams are sociology, family, economic geographers. You know, lots of different people come together, and you have to have that. You have to have the people, your people as partners in regards to what you're doing to grow research, and you have to meet the needs of what the people need. And so we are very blessed to have supportive partners that we have been
funded through SHRC, and we take that very seriously in terms of trying to be responsive and attentive to the needs of people through the research that we do and through the multiple collaborations and engagements that are part of my work. So 2 o'clock today, should you wish to come, we are here. I will be flying out tonight. So, so this is it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for setting the stage for this conference. And we certainly heard a number of themes that we would expect to hear: partnerships, relationships, community, collaboration. And I'd really encourage you, when you're deciding on what sessions to attend, to consider maybe what are some unexpected collaborations that could come out of even this conference. So rather than the usual, we often talk about the usual suspects. What are some of the unexpected? So maybe sectors that you're not normally working in or that you don't know a lot about. And so there's a lot of plugs for the 2 p.m. sessions. I will say that. So since I have the mic, I'll give a plug for a couple of other ones. I'm chairing a session today at 3:20. Strings Attached: Insights from an Award-Winning Public Engagement Collaboration. This is a really interesting one, and one that's close to my heart because it really looks at public engagement involving a group that maybe we don't often engage with. So people who can be maybe some challenging to engage with. And so some really exciting insights there. There's sessions on social enterprise. So there's all kinds of sectors and topics. So really get outside of your comfort zone and take a look and see what are some of the partnerships that could actually even come out of this conference. So to thank the panel, we're actually giving them each a subscription to the Newfoundland Quarterly, which is a gorgeous cultural journal of everything Newfoundland and Labrador. And so we hope that every time you receive a copy of it, you'll think of this conference, and hopefully it will remind you of wonderful things. So thank you to the panel. Thank you very much. Now, Jennifer introduced you to a Newfoundland term already, and we're going to continue on that theme. So I hope that I hear you use the word maggoty in sentences throughout the day and throughout the conference. I'll add another one to you, which I think you're probably already used to, which is yaffle. And so yaffle is traditionally what we would know as a loose measurement in the arms. You know, so I have like a yaffle of fish, I have a yaffle of wood, so whatever you can carry in your arms. But over the last few years, that word has been really taken over and to mean something else. And so yaffle.ca is actually a sponsor of the conference, and I'm going to invite Kim Crosby, who's the operations and strategic, who's manager of operations and strategic projects with the Harris Center, to tell us a little bit about yaffle. Kim.
So good morning and welcome to the People, Place and Public Engagement Conference. I'm here to introduce yaffle, and just for a quick lesson, who remembers what a yaffle is? Excellent. There goes the next 2 minutes of my speech. So yaffle really is a word. Yeah, it's a language lesson. It's a term from the Dictionary of Newfoundland English, which actually exists. This is the Newfoundland Dictionary of English. And yaffle, of course, being that armful or a load of anything. How many people here come from away? So there we go. We got a whole yaffle of mainlanders in the room this morning. The yaffle that I'm talking about, though, is yaffle.ca. There's no screen behind me. Yaffle.ca. It's Memorial's online public engagement connecting tool. It's an initiative of the Leslie Harris Center for Regional Policy and Development. And in Tech Talk, it's a searchable online repository of projects, people, opportunities, and networks. And as I'm talking, I'm going to have John down the back with the Harris Center just bring up a couple of flash screens so you can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about. For us here at the Harris Center Memorial University, it's an armful or a load of people. student, researchers, faculty, staff, community groups, concerned citizens, activists, general public, and the media. It's an armful or a gathering of place from within the university and the broader community across the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, with collaborators and research interests across the continent. And it's an armful or a load of public engagement, sharing our research projects, our collaborations, our events and activities, proposing ideas, brokering partnerships, looking for a solution. It's all available on yaffle.ca. Yaffle connects the research and resources of Memorial University with the people and places of this province. And we have some really exciting news that we are announcing for the first time today in an official capacity. We've recently partnered with Missouri University in the United States. They are a member of the broader Impacts Network, and they'll be developing Yaffle for deployment across their university system in Missouri. And here in Canada, we are finally starting our work with Research Impact to launch Yaffle as a national knowledge mobilization and public engagement tool. So if you'd like to find out more about Yaffle, you can certainly ask any of the Harris Center staff. I think some of them are here this morning. Boyan, Amy, Kathy's down in the back, and certainly Rob, our executive director. John as well down there. Justin, if Justin is here. And again, for the shameless plug of sessions that are going on over the conference the next 3 days, I will also be presenting on Yaffle in Friday's one of the breakout sessions. Thank you.
Let's get a flavor for the room now. How many people would say they've been working in public engagement for over 5 years or so? Okay, good. So the rest, anybody who really new to public engagement? Good, good. So we know who to attach ourselves to now. We can attach ourselves to the new people can go to the people who have all the experience, and we'll share. So far this morning, we've set context in terms of what to expect, some of the highlights that are coming within the conference. And now we're going to move to the state of public engagement in Canada and beyond, really with an international panel. And we're thrilled that we have this panel put together. It is being chaired by Dr. Noreen Golfman. And you know Noreen, everybody knows Noreen as the Provost and Vice President Academic of Memorial University. If you don't know her in that capacity, you would certainly know her as really a film guru in this province. And Noreen, I think it's fair to say that you've come off your own public engagement a couple of weeks with the St. John's Women's Film Festival, which is another interesting way to engage the public. So there's all kinds of variety and ways and creative ways that we can engage with the public. So I'll invite Noreen to come up and she will introduce the panel, and the panelists will speak to you about public engagement in Canada and beyond. Noreen.
Thanks, Lisa. Good morning, everybody. Good to be here with all of you. And I just wanted to point out the obvious is those spectacular centerpieces, which I believe have been arranged really creatively by Parks Canada. They're absolutely gorgeous, so take some pictures and tweet those out. Unlike most of our experiences at weddings, these are not to be taken home. Just keep them for posterity on your iPhone picture log, please. It's a pleasure to be introducing these distinguished panelists, and I will give you a brief introduction to them and then invite them up to present to you on the topic at hand. And first up is Ted Hewitt, who's visiting us from Ottawa. He is SSHRC president. I know he's familiar to many in the room. Of course, SSHRC is a great funder for so many of the projects that we're talking about over the next few days. Ted was Vice President, Research and International Relations at Western University, formerly known as the University of Western Ontario, from where I graduated. He was Professor of Sociology there. He's a leading authority on Brazil, and Ted's research focuses on national and international innovation systems. He is co-chair of the Canada-Brazil Joint Committee for Cooperation on Science, Technology, and Innovation, through which he emphasizes the important roles of universities, industry, and government in promoting economic prosperity. Ted was appointed a Grand Officer of the Order of Rio Branco in recognition of the many years he has fostered bilateral business and research partnerships between Brazil and Canada. So welcome, Ted, to our shores, our foggy shores. And next up will be Kevin Morgan. And Kevin, where is Kevin? Kevin is here. Hi, Kevin. We actually haven't met yet. He is Professor of Governance and Development at the School of Geography and Planning at Cardiff University. And he is also Dean of Engagement there. Very interesting administrative title. His research interests include place-based innovation theories, policies and practices, multi-level governance systems, urban and regional development strategies for less developed cities and regions, and sustainable food systems, especially with respect to public and urban food systems. He was the principal investigator for the EU-funded project on smart specialization, and his ESRC project on the sustainable procurement of school food won the first ever ESRC award for outstanding impact on public policy. He is currently researching agents of change in old industrial regions, as well as the role of engaged universities in regional innovation ecosystems. So welcome, Kevin. And finally is Sarah Woods. Where's Sarah? Hi, Sarah, welcome. She is Executive Associate to the Senior Vice Chancellor for Community Engagement and Director of the Barbara Waits Community Engagement Center at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, UNO, otherwise known as, where she oversees the operation of the university's Barbara Waits community. Well, I've just said that. Prior to the CEC, Ms. Woods was the Associate Dean of the UNO College of Public Affairs and Community Service. She has both a Master of Public Administration and a Bachelor of Arts degree from UNO. She is currently the board chair of the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation and is a board member of the Community Services Fund and Omaha Community Partnership. Welcome, Sarah. I'm going to welcome all of you up to the table here, please. And I've just been given a note, since my husband's in the room, that we're going to be ticketed because of where we parked.
Whose idea was that?
Mine. I've got the car key, so if you just come. I've got the car key here, Stephen. I got the car key here. Just.
You should say the street for other people. They
Yes.
have the same.
Actually, it's on Cabot Avenue, which is what.
Hello.
Oh, we're in the parking.
Oh, you're
We're fine.
Right.
No, we're not. Cabot Avenue, if you're on Cabot Avenue. I thought that was personally
Oh,
directed.
no.
Good story.
Yes. Sorry, honey. Ted is going to speak for about 20 minutes, and the other two, I think, for about 10. That's the time allotted. We've got a timekeeper here, so I'll hand it over to you.
I'm going to use the podium.
Sure.
I said too much, so it's good to move around. Hey, Gary. So good morning, everybody. Thank you, Noreen, colleagues, mesdames et messieurs. It's so great to be back here at Memorial in Newfoundland and to be able to speak a little bit on the state of public engagement, both in Canada and particularly Canada in the international context. And I'm really looking forward to that. Je tiens à féliciter chaleureusement aussi M. Kaczynowski, mon ami, et les organisateurs de la journée d'avoir eu la clarté d'esprit de tenir cette importante conférence. I have to personally thank Rob as well, because it's only due to Rob that I'm back here for the second time in less than a year. Last time it was snowing, so I'm hoping that maybe it won't this time, Rob. And so anyway, as someone said earlier, our agency, which many of you will know, maybe not all of our international guests will know, funds research in Canada, primarily academic research in the social sciences and in humanities, and has a very, very strong commitment to the application of that research in the social and the public context, as I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. And when I think about that, and I think about the projects that we funded, some of which were already mentioned, I think obviously about Memorial University. Someone mentioned research being led by Barbara Nace, who's a research professor in the Department of Sociology, my own discipline, one of the best, actually, here at Memorial. And who said that? And she's the project director of the On the Move partnership, which we heard about, which was the first comprehensive study of the spectrum of employment-related mobility in Canada, from extended daily travel to long-distance travel and related absence from home. Using the census of Canada, they're exploring how the spectrum has changed since 1981. And just from my own personal experience, I meet so many people today, whether I'm in Ottawa or Toronto or even internationally, who work in other places and live in other places. People in Ottawa who commute to Vancouver. I commute every week from Ottawa to London, Ontario, where my family is. People commute from Ottawa to Montreal. It fundamentally changes your life in many respects. I was on the plane last night with Newfoundlanders coming home from working on a dam project in northern Manitoba. So it's a really, really, really important piece of work. Tony Fang comes to mind as well. He's the Stephen Jaroslawski Chair of Cultural and Economic Transformation, and he's led studies looking at factors that can potentially enhance refugee integration and those that may negatively impact their settlement experiences and desire to remain in the province. And I know that's a very important issue, not just for Newfoundland, but other parts of Canada as well. So it's really, really clear to me, and has been for some time, not only thanks to Rob, but thanks to Rob in good measure, I know how Memorial is contributing new insights into people and their place on the planet. But you're also reaching out and making connections between research and the people who use it far beyond. YAFL is a great example. The Office of Public Engagement at Memorial, events like this conference truly emphasize that commitment to raising awareness in the community and across Canada about the many, many benefits that academic research offers society today. To put it another way, you recognize that good research can only be the key to a better future, a better quality of life, if people understand, appreciate, and ultimately embrace it. And to do that, increasingly, research must be done in partnership, and that's already been discussed. I'm going to wax philosophical a little bit here, and I don't want to offend anybody in particular, but we live in really interesting times, and that's a really kind word. Here in Canada and globally, we've seen major political upheavals in what we thought were fairly established democracies. Ideas and ideologies of the past century that were not expected to take root appear to be coming back at a rapid pace. Populism, for example, we've seen a resurgence throughout Europe and right here in North America. The decision by the UK to leave the EU, kind of turmoil that's created. The election of protectionist governments in Poland, in Mexico, well, maybe not Mexico, indeed our neighbor to the south in the United States. They're just a few examples of how large numbers of people chose to react to an increasingly globalized world. À tort ou à raison, je dois dire qu'au Canada, bon nombre d'entre nous s'estiment raisonnablement protégés. L'impression est que nous nous en sortons plutôt bien depuis les dernières années. We tend to think of ourselves as fairly insulated from all this. Things aren't going that bad in Canada if you really think about it. The economy is okay. We've gotten through the NAFTA, whatever we're calling it now, negotiations with the US. We're generally a tolerant people. Amazingly, in Canada, by survey, over 80% of Canadians recognize the positive benefit of immigrants. They may think there's too much immigration or maybe too little, but that's an incredible number. We are serious about climate change. The numbers of climate change deniers, there are a few, and that's their right, and we have to take this into account. But something's going on. We've accepted that, and we're making policy change to reflect that. We are working finally towards reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous people. And I'm just so proud to be involved in a number of events this year in that front. And I think, we are making good progress. So there's reason at least to, it's not perfect, but there's reason at least to be a bit hopeful about the future. And I would say that to the extent that that's true, it's thanks to our many colleagues in the social sciences and the humanities, but other disciplines as well, who toil and who have toiled in the past to create new knowledge that helps create an enlightened citizenry and guide enlightened policy development together with partners in government and within the public domain. We can all point to influential bodies of work in social science that pave the way for the development of Canadian policy on, for example, official bilingualism, demographic research on residential segregation that helped Canada largely avoid the pitfalls associated with the growth of ethnic and racial ghettos, research that contributed to government policy that lifted millions of seniors out of poverty and allowed for the development of a national health care system that Canadians would literally die for if it were threatened. And I can think of no political party in this country that has seriously challenged our national healthcare system. And this work continues, proudly funded by SSHRC. One of our grant recipients, who's a filmmaker and an associate professor in the Department of Geography at the University of Winnipeg, has been documenting, for example, the changes in climate in both the Canadian Arctic and on the prairies. He's helped create an interactive digital atlas that helps people in Canada's West anticipate changes in temperature based on projected carbon levels. And taking this further, he's created engaging videos in which he shows farmers and others in the West the projections with this online tool and gets their ideas on what needs to be done proactively to ensure that the farming industry is ready for the impacts of climate change. That's truly interactive, truly public engagement, and I could go on and on and on. I want to talk a little bit about innovation because in some respects, this is public engagement par excellence, if you think about it. It's front and center among Canada's national priorities. Every federal budget, we see greater and greater investments in what's come to be known as the country's innovation agenda. À l'heure actuelle, de nouvelles initiatives comme les fonds stratégiques pour l'innovation, les super groupes d'innovation, la stratégie en matière de compétences mondiales, le défi des villes intelligentes et la stratégie canadienne en matière d'intelligence artificielle s'apprêtent à placer le Canada en position de force dans la course mondiale à l'innovation. At the base of a lot of these programs, and Gary, you know this, is technological development. So your own super cluster that you've been involved in, the Canada First Research Excellence Fund, technology really is the core of this element. But one of the things that we are increasingly understanding is that innovation is more and more and more about public engagement. It's about people. It's about working with communities and defining and shaping and managing that interface between innovative technologies and people. We need people, and we need to invest in people with the skills to assess and convey not just the benefits, but also the risks that come with any piece of technology. I mean, just because you make it doesn't mean you can or you should implement what you've made within the context of the broader society. Technology itself, science itself, has no ethical mandate to implement itself. That's a human exercise. It's what we decide to do or not to do. So I think about some research along these lines that's been incredibly important that's funded by SSHRC. Dr. Teresa Heffernan from St. Mary's across the way in Nova Scotia is a good example of this people-centered approach. She's working to expose some of the possible dangers of artificial intelligence. She's found that algorithms often have the same gender or race biases as humans can. So just because it's artificial intelligence, if it's been designed by somebody who is fundamentally linked to one part of the population or another, it's bound to reflect those prejudices. Ask my wife. She gets in my Volvo, and the first thing she says is, "Where do I put my purse?" Why is that? Because the designers of that car had thought only about male drivers in the design, but not anymore. And this is not a plug for Volvo. But I told her, I said, the recent ads for the new XC40 have a place to put your purse. And I think this is how we apply people-centered approach to innovation and why it's so important. And you can imagine, other more serious instances of where design and the linkage to people's use and specific sectors of the population, their use of technology would be absolutely critical, and what some of the detrimental effects of that could be. Although some might be fairly easy to spot, and the one I gave you was a good example, there are more subtle biases that could lead to influencing how governments use big data to make decisions. There is a huge kerfluffle, as you know. Is that a Newfoundland term, Gary? Kerfluffle? In Toronto recently with the development of the new sort of data-centered neighborhood on the waterfront that Google's been involved. I think it's Google. I don't want to malign a particular company, but can you imagine, if every part of your day is being monitored? I read a thing that said that Walmart is now going to know when you're in their store. Now, they said it's so that they can have your order ready to pick up. So think about this, though. I mean, the technology for that already exists. I mean, if you carry a cell phone, people can figure out where you are very, very easily. I found if you go on the web, you can tell where people are right now. There's a program, you put in their cell number, it'll tell you where they are. So if we have no say over that, if people aren't involved in the design and the implementation of these innovations, how might they be used? I don't want to be tracked all day. I don't want commercial enterprises or government knowing where I am at any time. Oh, wait a sec, that already happens. But when I'm off the clock, I think that's my business, and how will that information be used? And we know how it's being used, not only for crime fighting, which is beneficial, but if it's going to be to target me. If you now go on the web, you look up mattresses, and it tells you about trips to Florence. Why? Because you were on the web the day before looking up flights to Italy. So that memory is still ingrained in your IP or whatever, and you start looking for something else, and then it's reminding you, oh, by the way, you didn't finish your purchase that you started yesterday. Why don't you come back? So we have to think carefully about how that gets applied. Using more technology also, and this is a key point, won't guarantee our future economic sustainability. By maximizing the level of creativity, adaptability, foresight, and human understanding associated with the development of and use of that technology will. Steve Jobs, who was the founder of Apple, as you know, once described himself as living at the intersection of the social sciences and humanities and technology. Steve Jobs, the guy who put this thing on the market. He used the words, social sciences and humanities. He knew that the success of any enterprise, including his own, depends on understanding change through both of these perspectives. And he led a revolution in technology that continues with breathtaking speed. And many of the technologies have led quite naturally to equally remarkable transformations in work practices and lifestyles. Just think about how daily routines have changed through the introduction of technology-based services like Netflix and Uber and so many others that we rely on every day. Will taking a taxi or watching a video ever be the same? 3D printing, now I understand you can 3D print weapons. No wonder they call them disruptive technologies. Will all these things change our lives for the better? Maybe. You can prototype a medical device, but if I can produce an Uzi on a 3D printing machine, that's probably not a good idea, and hopefully illegal in this country. Driverless cars, I don't know, it kind of makes sense to me, but would I send my kids to school in a driverless bus? Do we want to? Should we? At some level, we have to put, in the term artificial intelligence, we have to kind of put the intelligence back in the equation, and that intelligence fundamentally should always be human intelligence. So the point being that what drives real innovative change in any society is how technology is applied by people for productive purposes in ways not previously entertained. And researchers in the social sciences and in the humanities have an extremely important role to play, and that's why we're so proud to fund them. We know that early adopters have a competitive edge and that the social sciences and humanities can help us understand more quickly the economic, social, environmental, legal, and ethical implications of technology, and that true innovation is a more innovative, more holistic, enterprise, a multidisciplinary endeavor that at its heart is inextricably linked to human behavior, and I would argue inextricably linked to partnerships between technology developers and society and public policy. Fortunately, we have a federal government in place currently that recognizes this and has been proud to support social science, humanities, and science across the disciplinary array, and particularly the application of that research to evidence-based policy, which is absolutely critical for all of us in the room. The last federal budget made historic investments to the granting councils and to new programming that would support Canada's international linkages to develop interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary research to foster and encourage rapid response to emerging research issues. So we're very grateful. Au CRSH, nous sommes très heureux d'avoir reçu cet important investissement pour la recherche. J'ose penser que cette bonne annonce faite dans le budget de 2018 en partie dû à l'efficacité avec laquelle nous offrons nos programmes ainsi que la façon dont nous savons créer les liens avec le gouvernement, la communauté et les intervenants. So the numbers of researchers now, talking about direct engagement, that we fund at SSHRC, working directly with government and policy development, has never been higher. Collaborations are worth millions of dollars. We work with a number of government departments, including Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. We work with DND. We work with Employment and Social Development Canada, with Global Affairs Canada. Two benefits: the money that they provide for us to provide that programming actually frees up other dollars that we can use to fund investigator-driven research. It also provides excellent opportunities for researchers to intervene directly and to participate directly with research, with government departments in the formulation of policy. And we know that that's absolutely critical. In the context of public engagement, that can have a very, very huge impact. And we are at the forefront of that activity. I'm going to wrap up, I think, because there are a number of key areas that I want to talk about, and I'm sure I'll have a chance to do that later in the day, but I want to emphasize one of those before I do, and that is the work that we've been doing in promoting reconciliation with Indigenous people in Canada. It's absolutely critical. It's already been mentioned today. I'm looking forward to attending some of those sessions. We are essential players, that is, the research that's funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council have become very important players in this reconciliation journey, both in dealing with hidden and often uncomfortable truths in our histories, cultures, laws, perceptions, habits, and ways of thinking, and in the science of building up a foundation for genuine reconciliation and growth based on the two-way flow of knowledge and understanding between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. We have been involved, led by the Canada Research Coordinating Committee, with a national exercise to promote and explore how we can better support Indigenous research and research by and with Indigenous communities in accordance with the Call to Action 65 in the Truth and Reconciliation Report. With some funding from the federal government, we are now engaged in a process of dialogue and interchange with Indigenous people across the country. There are 8 to 10 events that have been planned. We embarked upon this exercise with a completely open book. It was designed with our partners in the Indigenous community, and it's being executed with our partners in the Indigenous community. And the results, I think, will be fascinating in terms of where they think we should go in terms of future support for this particular venture. So all of that, in a way, brings me back not just to the state, talking about a bit about the state of Canada, but the state of the world. I think, as I said previously, we may see ourselves as fortunate to have largely avoided the perils of some of the things that are going on in other parts of the world, but we are by no means out of the woods. Social sciences and humanities research not only allows for reflection and sometimes action that helps solve problems in very creative ways, in good measure, it may well serve as a prophylactic against the evils that can potentially tear us apart: racism, intolerance, nationalism, xenophobia. It does this by exposing them, by reminding us of our history in Canada and around the world, and reminding us of the serious negative consequences of pursuing a path to the bottom, so to speak, as opposed to hopeful inclusion and promise. So I'm looking forward to hearing your views on all these topics. I'm really looking forward to hearing the kind of work that you're doing in your communities and how we might better support that, as we always are. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to talk a bit about one of my favorite subjects, and I wish you very, very well with your conference today.
Good morning, everyone. Can I begin by thanking Rob Greenwood and his colleagues at Memorial for the invitation to join you for these next few days, because I honestly can't think of a more fitting place to be discussing public engagement, because Memorial, I've known for many, many years, is second to none anywhere in the world in terms of treating public engagement seriously. And that's not just being kind to my host. Rob Greenwood knows that very well, that I've been tracking what's been going on here for quite a long time. But what I want to talk about in the next 9.5 minutes is what's going on in the UK. I think it's fair to say that public engagement is the Cinderella of the higher education sector in the United Kingdom. It's, we used to call it the third mission, and it very much is the third mission in terms of having a third status after research and teaching. Every British academic's career is dominated by two things: the REF and the TEF. The REF is the Research Excellence Framework by which governments multi-annually assess the status of research. And if you're ranked lowly, you don't get any money for research from the government. So that's the REF. The TEF is more recent. That's the Teaching Excellence Framework. In other words, British academics are being audited like never before. And if those two audits weren't enough, we've now got a third audit called the KEF. That is the Knowledge Exchange Framework, which we are discussing the metrics with the government right now. The big danger is that that KEF is drawn and framed so narrowly that it's little more than tech transfer and commercialization of IP, which, as we all know in this room, and as you know very well in Canada and particularly in Memorial, that's only a small part of any self-respecting PE agenda, Mr. President. So those are the problems that British academics suffer, but there are chinks of light. And being an eternal optimist, I like to work with these chinks of light. And there are three chinks of light that I work in as a Dean of Engagement at Cardiff University. I have been for the last 5 years. And these are the chinks of light that I work with to persuade my colleagues to treat engagement seriously. First of all, in this REF, the Research Excellence Framework, sorry about all these acronyms, but we are dominated by them. The Research Excellence Framework, there's a new metric in this now called research impact, and its weighting is growing. It was 20% in the last REF exercise. It's now 25% in the new exercise. And that means that all academics are now obliged to think about the impact of their research on economy, society, or public policy. And that's been a real door opening from my point of view, because nobody can anymore pretend that engagement it doesn't matter. The second chink of light is that the British government has finally discovered that geography matters. Its new industrial strategy accords a major status to place-based innovation policy. And of course, universities are the quintessential place-based institutions. They're not here today and gone tomorrow. Some of them have existed for centuries, and I dare say many will carry on existing for centuries. They've been place-based, but they've never been place-focused. That is to say, to really treat the place in which they're based. Local university accepted, Mr. President. Many universities in the UK have never taken their place, particularly the research-led so-called Russell Group institutions. And now they are, because they can see there's money attached to engaging in place. And the third chink of light is the Civic Mission. The Civic Mission is a new debate in the United Kingdom. There's a new report just come out last week by the Civic University Commission in England, talking about the need to reclaim the civic mission, the civic university agenda. And it argues that its main argument is it says there's lots of civic engagement going on in the UK, but does that mean that they're all civic universities? And the answer is no. And that brings me to my third and final theme, which is the civic mission in Wales. Last year, our Minister for Education has devolved, by the way, it's a devolved competence in the United Kingdom, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. And in Wales, our Welsh Minister arrived at Cardiff University last year, and she scolded us and all the other universities in Wales for not treating our civic mission seriously. This was in the light of the Brexit referendum, which was, in my view, working in Europe a lot, is a tragedy and will be seen to be a tragedy in the not too distant future. She scolded us for not treating the civic mission mandate seriously, because Cardiff had voted exactly the same as London, 60-40 to remain. Because as you know, the key variable in the Brexit vote was education. All university towns voted to remain. We voted the same as London, but our region, the South Wales Valleys, the old historic coalfield where I come from originally, voted heavily to leave. And that showed a huge divide between the city and the region. And she scolded us and said, it's time that you guys bridge the gulf between the campus and the community. And that was a shot in the arm for us. We had to raise our game. But in our debates in Cardiff University, I've said to our Vice Chancellor, our President, that a civic mission university is not what a university says, but what a university does. And that is to say, we are, and what constitutes a civic university? And my argument has always been a university that pays an accredited living wage. You can't claim to be a civic university if you're not paying a living wage to your employers, particularly those who do the catering, the cleaning, and keep the university ticking over. We are sad to say, we are the only living wage employer in Wales, and we're putting a lot of heat on our other universities, and if needs be, to name and shame them, because as place-based anchor institutions, that's the very least that they can do, is pay a living wage to the lowest paid in the country. We are now doing an audit on our public procurement policy to look at our public procurement spend. We spend millions year in, year out, to look at how many apprenticeships we are paying per £1 million spend. These are the real metrics, it seems to me, of a civic university, a university that treats its place and its staff seriously. We are doing all the other stuff, of course, that other universities are doing, civic engagement projects, in our communities as we define them, near and far. That is to say, we're working in our backyard, in the city, we're working in the region. We're working in Africa under the Welsh Government's Wales for Africa programme, where we're transferring skills in terms of life sciences, in terms of maths, computer sciences, all the disciplines, by the way, that our Namibian hosts have decided are apposite for them. Not what we've decided to transfer, what they've invited us to transfer. But the projects are as diverse as our staff interests are. Currently, for example, my time is being taken up by our School of Pharmacy. We're doing a world-class project on bees, on honeybees. And they're using a honeybee project. Their roof is full of honeybees right now. And they're using the bees to promote STEM education, mainly science, in the schools, in the poorest districts of our city. So we're trying to support them to do that. Then they're forming a social enterprise to sell their honey, to sell cosmetics, and to sell other products based on honey. So that brings me to my conclusion. I'm the first Dean of Engagement at Cardiff University. I don't know whether I'm boasting or complaining when I say that, but it's a fact. It's simply a fact. And reflecting on those 5 years, people say, well, what's going well, what's going wrong? Let me just say what's going wrong, because that's what we learn most from, it seems to me. The biggest problem of all I've found in Cardiff University, and I suspect this is true of many other British universities, by the way, is how do we align our internal structures and practices and values? How do we align that internal stuff with our external aspirations and our rhetoric? Because there's an enormous disconnect. It's getting smaller, but it's still a sizable and embarrassing disconnect. A second problem is how do we get our heads of school, our real departmental heads, to give parity of esteem to public engagement, along with teaching and as you've done here in Memorial, Mr. President. And I take my hat off to you for having done that. But it's easier said than done to give to view and validate an academic's work who's working in public engagement. If she or he is doing a lot of work, that work needs to be factored into the workload model, those horrible things that are taking over our lives. And my last point comes back to Christina Murray's point. Christina Murray this morning said that all public engagement in the end boils down to relationships. I think that sums it up, really. But I think then relationships, I'm wrapping up now. Relationships themselves then consist of a whole series of intangible factors that we're not very good at in the university sector in the UK. For example, as we say to our master's students, trust is the biggest developmental asset of all if you can get it. Why? Because it's unique. Trust has a value but no price. You can't buy it, you can only earn it. And that takes time and patience. Number two, another difficult thing for academics, listening as opposed to talking. To learn the art of listening, to listen to what our partners in the community are saying to us and expect from us. And that requires a third thing, I think, is for academics to respect knowledge outside the academy, whether that knowledge is in the business sector, in the community sector, or wherever. Academics often have a problem, a genuine problem, respecting knowledge, which is non-academic, non-disciplinary. And that requires respect in lots of ways. And that then brings me to my fourth and final ingredient of all, which is humility, of course. And let me put it diplomatically. Academics are not over-endowed with humility. Thank you very much.
Very well said. Thank you. I am so happy to be here. So Jen and a team of people came to UNO a couple of years ago, and I told Jen earlier, I feel like an aunt or something. Coming to see the space is just such truly an honor. It is just truly overwhelming to come here. So just real briefly, Omaha, for those of you who have not been lucky enough to be there, Omaha is a big blue dot in the middle of a very red conservative, the conservative Midwest in the United States. It is the home to Warren Buffett and Omaha Steaks. So hopefully now you have a good idea where we are. We are blessed with a really rich philanthropic community. We are a music place. We have great music, great food, great steak. I'm a vegetarian though, so that doesn't help me, but it is a great place to live. And I invite you someday to come. Most people are really surprised, right, Jen, when you come, because it is we are an innovative, fun city, and we get kind of short shrift, and that's okay. We're happy to surprise people. So thank you so much for letting me come today and talk about the very simple subject, right? I'm looking for Matt. Is Matt from the Swear Center. This is a simple subject to talk about engagement in the United States. So I'm going to do my best, and then I'm going to let Matt clean up for me later. So thank you. I will say parking, do not underestimate the importance of parking and public engagement. It is, and I mean this, this is funny, but it's also quite serious. There is nothing that community people, I think, take as seriously as how to park on a university campus. You know, it says so much about how open you are to communities when you let community people park on your campus and actually just find and access your campus. So don't, please keep that in mind as you think about engagement. We took, I shouldn't say we, because then I'd have like a big mark on my chest, but we had took 3 parking lots, 2 faculty staff lots and a student lot to build our engagement center at UNO, because our chancellor said that we were not going to base our future of our university on how many parking stalls we had in the center of campus. So we pushed our parking out, and luckily we had that space to do that. And it transformed our campus in terms of how the community saw us and really redefined us. So kind of moving on to the topic here about community engagement and university engagement in communities in the United States. And I want to kind of talk about 5 things, I think, first of all, that are kind of why I think community engagement, university engagement has become so important. One, I think, is just that we are seeing this new generation of faculty emerge in the United States, where I think that we are seeing new faculty really expect and demand, to some degree, opportunities to become connected to community in terms of their research and their teaching. They are eager to push boundaries in terms of how their research can impact communities, how their students can interact and learn. We are a metropolitan university at UNO. We're very proud of that, and our new faculty come in and they want those experiences. And the best and brightest of those faculty really come to us with that expectation, and we find that we are better because of them. And they are pushing the boundaries with the older, I shouldn't say older, the senior faculty in their departments and transforming those departments. And I could tell you wonderful stories about some of our more traditional departments that have been transformed, absolutely transformed at UNO in that regard. I think that's the case throughout the United States. Another is philanthropy. So we are blessed in Omaha, not just because of Warren. We all call him Warren, by the way. We don't. He did park once in one of my parking stall, but that's as close as I've gotten to Warren. But we're blessed in Omaha, and I think a lot of communities are, where philanthropy is becoming increasingly engaged in problem solving in communities, and that connects them more and more to universities. Because of that, we're partnering more and more with philanthropy to solve community problems, and universities are becoming more and more engaged in that. Philanthropy, I think, is looking at us as helping to solve problems and partner with our communities to solve those problems. Another area, I think, is just government impact. So we're a state university, and we have had challenges in our government about what our impact is. And community engagement, engaging our faculty, engaging our staff, and engaging our students and helping to show what our impact is in our state, in our economy, and in our communities in terms of what difference we make is very important, and that is a key role I think that public engagement makes. Another key area, especially for a university like ours, where we have a very high population of first-generation students, is student success. And we know when we engage students in high-impact practices like service learning and community-based learning, they do better. And not only do they do better in terms of student retention and graduation, but they're better employees. And our businesses tell us they want students who have those experiences. And again, we have a responsibility to turn out students who are great employees who stay in Omaha. So that's a key component. So I'm going to move now a little bit to how we support community, or and I talked about community and university engagement kind of in the same, so I'll go back and forth. And we do that obviously through engaged research, engaged teaching, and engaged service. So I know we've talked a lot about engaged research here. I want to talk about all three. We see them all as important, and I'll talk about all three. And one obviously is just through rewards. And that obviously, first of all, we talk so much about through promotion and tenure, and that's important at UNO, and I think in all universities in the United States. And it's always one of the big challenges we hear about, especially in working with faculty, and the challenges they have in terms of getting engaged work as part of their their RPT processes. I was lucky, Associate Dean in the College of Public Affairs and Community Service. Actually, we required community engaged work as part of our promotion and tenure process. And even then, sometimes our faculty had challenges. But increasingly, that process, even through the 10 years I was in that role, we saw that evolve. And now at UNO, and I think in a lot of universities in the United States, we're seeing that slowly change again because, again, of this new generation of faculty. But those processes are changing slowly, but they're changing over. I think another way we are rewarding is through kind of acknowledging that it already happens. We look at our overall funding at UNO, our external funding, and we find that about 80% of our external funding supports is supporting engaged work. So about 20% of our external funding supports basic research or creative activity. But almost everything else that has come into the university has supported engaged work, training, applied research, international work. And that is a big statement. So it is not as though engaged work does not bring value back to departments and support graduate assistants and support research. It just looks a little bit different. And I think that pushes kind of what maybe traditional thinking is about the value of that work. Another thing we're doing, I think, increasingly across the United States is we're recognizing and celebrating engaged work, more and more awards nationally, as well as on campuses. So we are instituting awards for faculty who are doing really good engaged work in communities. And that engaged work is not just work that's recognized internally, but we're recognizing it through publications and in rigorous scholarly journals. Again, bringing recognition to the fact that this work is being recognized by scholars in the field as well. I think just, again, elevating that recognition is important. And also then just not only recognizing that that work occurs, but then making sure across the campuses that that work is occurring and saying this work has value. Another thing I think we're trying to do, again, in the United States is supporting service learning as a pedagogy, supporting community-based learning, and giving it the credit it deserves. Our communities now are expecting and demanding it in some ways. At UNO, we have over 200 classes a year in service learning alone that we know of. We know that there are other kind of stealth service learning classes that people don't tell us about it, that's okay. But our, the ones that actually show up in our catalog, we ask that there are certain standards that occur in that learning. Uh, Our service learning is externally funded to some degree when faculty engage in that. Oh my gosh, 1 minute. When we engage in that, we actually support it with graduate assistance. We try to connect. We have a web-based module that we're applying that helps connect faculty and staff and students and community to the different resources we have. And then finally, I think another thing we're doing is creating centers, either administrative centers that support engagement through organized approaches. So a great example is the Netter Center at Penn that has a wonderful supportive set of supports for engaged work at the University of Pennsylvania, Square Center at Brown, but there's engagement centers throughout the United States that provide support in specific communities or throughout that are administratively supportive, or there's centers like ours at the Barbara White's Community Engagement Center. And I'm not going to tell you about it now because on Friday, I think at 1 o'clock, we're going to talk about it more. That's my ... And we'll tell you all about it then. So I do just want to emphasize, though, that to know one university and its engagement is to know one engagement approach in a university in the United States. They are all very different, and they evolve. So I will end there. On time? All right. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you, all three. Gave us a lot to chew on. It covered, I think, a broad spectrum of themes that are going to emerge in conversation over the next few days. We have lots of time for questions and comment. And I think there are mics on the floor. Paula and others will bring the mics to you. Maybe I'll just kick it off with one question for each of you. And it's a question I think all of you have touched on in some way, but I think especially Kevin did. And it is, what challenges, social or institutional or political, do you see inhibiting the potential for more public or civic or social engagement at our universities today? Sure.
In a nutshell, I would say that most of my colleagues in the UK are suffering from cognitive overload in terms of being audited to death. And especially early stage colleagues, early career colleagues, are suffering from a lot of burnout already. You know that there is an epidemic of mental illness in the UK among school children. There's a cluster of early student suicides in some universities. Bristol, for example, a very, very good university. They're currently doing an audit on what's going wrong in terms of mental health with their students, and it's not confined to Bristol. So I think that there is so many pressures on academics in the UK right now, mainly through audit, that they're finding it increasingly difficult to find time and mental space for public engagement, because in many cases that engagement work is not viewed and valued and validated in a way which it should be. And until that happens, we won't have real parity of esteem until it becomes as it is in Memorial. So that would be my, my quick take on that.
I would.
I think you have to press it, Sarah. Just, yeah.
Okay, try that. All right, thank you. I would concur with that. I think the challenges of time are substantial. The other, I think that a lot of us deal with are transitions in leadership. So we have gone through a substantial change in leadership at UNO in the last couple of years, both on a kind of what we'd say a provost or a vice chancellor level, and then also on a chancellor level. And so even just finding commonality and definitions of what we see as engagement, and then up on the next level of engagement, and what the priorities of the institution are, can change. And so that creates angst, and it creates a level of how much do we invest at any level, given that that might change. And that, I think that uh, that makes it difficult, but then also it makes the communities that we deal with a little uncomfortable sometimes in investing in long-term types of partnerships when they're not really sure how long that particular endeavor is going to last. And so you talked about trust, and I will add, trust is hard to gain, and it is so easy to lose. And communities, especially communities that are impoverished, it's even more the case. And so, and we work so hard to maintain those relationships, and we are always at risk of losing them.
I would agree first off with everything that's been said. I think from the funder's perspective, there are probably three things that we hear about a lot. First one would have been just having the money. A couple of years ago, I think we would have heard, well, there's not enough money, the success rates are very low at Shirk, and that's changing, and you'll see that, in the results of various competitions that will come out very soon. So our Insight grants gone from 20% to over 40% success rate. There've been higher success rates for partnership grants where a lot of the community based work is done. Insight development for our early career researchers, that's going to soar over 50%. So we want to move the percentage of faculty engaged in research and being funded for that from about 20% currently to 25 or 30%. So there's more money in the system. We launched our partnership engage grants, which are $25,000, but specifically designed to get people out and partnering. So that said, that's good news. On the less good news side, we hear a lot about the pain and the challenges of partner engagement from the partner side. So you mentioned parking, but in terms of the forms, for funding at least, the forms partners have to fill out. The language that's used is often more academic than community based. And it's a lot of work, maybe for the chance that you won't even get funded. And that's especially true with Indigenous partners. So we're looking now, it's part of the reason why we're doing the engagement that we're doing, is to find better ways and other ways to support those types of community engagement. The last thing I would refer to as colleague related factors, and that is when you do community work or you do partnership-based work, your colleague, you can tell me I'm wrong, I would love to be told, this is a thing of the past, but your colleagues probably aren't going to value that as much as they are a publication in Science, Nature, Canadian Journal of Sociology and Anthropology, whatever. And this has a real dampening effect, particularly for younger scholars who want to do it because, they have to decide, tenure, community engagement, a report that could help my community, or publication in, Canadian Journal of X or the International Journal of Y. So that's still a big factor. And sure, to the extent we can help, we will help. If our funding helps validate the work that you do and colleagues are able to say, I've been funded with this grant or that to do that, we're hoping that's going to help change some of the thinking around that. That's what I see basically.
Yeah, all that sounds familiar. At Memorial, we, at the Harris Center, or the Engagement Office, led a survey of faculty last year to assess the validating or lack of, let's say, of engagement. Of course, we're bound by collective agreement language, and that's part of the kind of discourse of embedding engagement in the research and teaching practices. But overwhelming majority, I think, I don't remember what the actual percentage was, Rob, but very, very high percentage of faculty said that more attention need to be paid to engagement, the kind of engaged work that faculty were interested in doing. But yes, there's that disconnect between, let's say, P&T culture and the will of most people to actually be doing that work. So there's that gap that, again, I think Kevin also spoke of earlier. So the floor is yours. Hands up. If you could raise your hand, we'll get you a mic, and you could, don't be shy, David, and you could identify yourself when that would be helpful.
Great. Hi, David Phipps from York University. Ted, as a member of the Canada, used to be the Tri-Council Coordinating Committee, that one with you and your colleagues. How much is of these principles are being taken up in NSERC and CIHR?
I'd get you to clarify a bit, which principles, the sort of community engagement principles?
Okay, so yeah, the principles that we've been talking about are the engagement.
You're asking me about other agencies, right? It's always tricky. I would say, let me talk about the Canada Research Coordinating Committee, because that, as chair, I can speak more effectively to that. I do believe in the other councils. I think CIHR, has been very engaged through the institutes and will continue to be engaged in community-based research, I think. SHRC has always been the leader. I think SHRC will continue to be the leader. I think NSERC, given its focus on science and engineering, I think has probably some ways to go, but I think they fully realize that. I can tell you with respect to their engagement with Indigenous people, they know and have said that they have some catch up that they want to do, and they're willing to certainly engage with us to see how we do things as SHRC. So I think it's coming. At CRCC, I can't tell you that that's a primary focus right now, in part because our ministers, the Minister of Health and the Minister of Science, have laid out a path for us where they want us to start primarily and first and foremost on issues related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, support for early career researchers, Canada's international engagement, et cetera. A lot of that does speak directly to community research. We are about to launch a call, our first call in the next few weeks, which will be directed, if things play out as I expect, towards early career researchers. But we're looking for things that are out of the box, that are different, that are not likely to be funded through the councils, that would involve new methodologies, new approaches, and we want to hear about that all. I think that's going to strongly support community-based and participation-based approaches, and we will welcome those. So in answer to your question, obviously, this is something that we're going to be thinking about more and more. Right now, it's not on the priority list, but I think some of the things that we're doing will encourage that. But generally, yes, I would agree, across the councils, it's happening. It'd be a little slower in some places than others, but I'm just happy to be president of the agency that is proud and has moved forward the fastest, I think, in this regard.
Just a reminder, these proceedings are being webcast, and we invite questions from anybody who's watching online. And the address is what, Rebecca? engagement@mun.ca. So feel free to email questions in, and we will channel them here.
Good morning. My name is Don Poirier. I have a cold, so stop talking. It's not you, it's me. With university, I'll just hold it. Thank you. So it was interesting to hear about the many reasons why engagement within the university context struggles uphill in some ways. And I was interested to hear the articulate explanation in Omaha, some of the drivers for why do it in the first place, because it's hard to do. And I'm wondering if you could comment within the Canadian and the UK context. Is there anything unique within those areas that is driving engagement beyond what we heard in Omaha? Or is there a lot of similar dynamics?
Can I try and address that? And in addressing it, also try to respond to what Ted said, which I agree with, when he said, when public engagement goes head to head with research and publications, it'll always come off second best. And I think that's my experience as well. But can I also say, in answer to Ted and responding to your question, I think how we respond, we need to respond to that. And this is my own response with my colleagues, is that because there's no answer to that if it's treated like a binary. But we should frame it in the way that public engagement is changing and driving new research models. And when we understand the way research is going in the world, we'll understand that engagement and research are cousins and not binary opposites. If I can just give you an example, I'm talking about like a Venn diagram here, where engagement, research, and teaching are all interconnected. And if you think of the new models of social innovation and societal challenge that are coming out around the world, for example, the European Commission for the post-2020 period of research has defined a number of research challenges. And those challenges are broadly defined. They are things like plastic-free oceans, low-carbon cities, halving the burden of dementia, creating dignified elder care systems. In all of those areas, I argue with my colleagues, there is no disciplinary answer to those questions. And it's only by working with citizen consumer groups in co-production networks that we can begin to frame the right questions and collectively work in concert to establish the right answers. And if we think that research is moving in that direction, and I believe it is, and I see it with my colleagues, once we frame it in those terms, I think we can answer the problematic that Ted framed about public engagement versus research and publications, because academics can see good careers, research careers, and publications by working in concert with their community peers. I don't know how you'd respond to that, Ted.
I know we're just about out of time here. And, oh, there's a few hands up, but I've been told there's 1 minute. What do you say, Sandy? One question? I'm going to toss it to my husband, who I humiliated earlier. So this is a compensatory gesture. Yeah.
I want to help out Dr. Hewitt by saying something about CIHR. I can't say anything about NSERC, but I do know that CIHR is paying more attention than it used to. A lot of their research is focused on what they call patient-oriented research. At least patients are part of the public, a significant part of the public for health researchers. And they also are paying more attention than they used to what you call knowledge mobilization, and they, for some strange reason, called knowledge translation. I would also point out, in answer to the question Noreen raised about obstacles, the British situation is interesting, but over auditing isn't the only factor, because at MUN we are under audited, if anything. Once you get tenure, no one pays any attention to what you do ever again. But still, it's very hard to get engaged research to be respected. And one option, and this is a suggestion for SSHRC, if there were a journal, a serious Canadian or international journal that published only about engaged, community engaged research, you could bridge that dualism. People could do engaged research and get a publication in a respected journal out of it. So over to you.
Any quick comments to that before we wrap up? Okay, I guess not. Thank you. That was Stephen Bornstein. He is the director of the Center for Applied Health Research on our campus. And a driver, yes. There is a car theme that has emerged here this morning. And I just want to return to that theme about parking, that you will be ticketed in a very unfriendly way, obviously, by the city. If you're on Cabot Street, which is just below here, in a much more friendly way, you can be accommodated with free parking on the lots here outside this building and in the Geo Center if where there's overflow, right? So feel free to do that. I want to thank all of these panelists for helping set the table for today. Terrific. And They'll be around for more conversation later today and I hope tomorrow. So please join me in thanking Ted and Kevin and Sarah. And I have some gifts for each of them, of course.
Thanks, Noreen. That's great.
Thank you, Noreen, and panelists for what was a great session. Oh, yep. Thank you all very, very much. And in the car theme, keeping in the car theme that Noreen and Stephen have started here, thank you all for getting the wheels in motion for our plenary sessions today. I would like to thank our panelists with the presentation of gifts that have been provided by one of our sponsors, Parks Canada and Newfoundland Quarterly, and I'll present those in a few minutes. In the meantime, we have a quick break right now in the program, so I suggest you all grab a coffee and a stretch and come back in 10 minutes for a special presentation by Vanier Institute. And following that, we'll have our next plenary session on advancing public engagement in Canada. So I ask our three panelists to come forward, please, and accept gifts. As a small token for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here and providing great insights and talking to us about the challenges and successes of public engagement. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. That's Sarah. Thank you all very much. So grab your coffee, have your stretch, and come back in 10 minutes. For those of you who are still in the room, I do want to clarify on the issue of parking. You do have to pay for parking in the lots associated with this building, but you do not have to pay for parking across the street at the Geo Center.
I was going to ask you if we could share a dance.
Sure. So when I'm done, I'll just unplug here and you can plug in. You have the same time. You do.
Yeah. I think so. So this is just for the projector.
Yeah, it's just an adapter. So
Oh,
this is
okay.
what plugs in.
I've never seen an adapter quite like that.
Yeah, it gives you every possible.
Nice. I've just got the 3-1, and then
Yeah.
I've got another 3-1. I'm like, it looks like a US, like an external hard
Right,
drive, right?
right.
So I was a little
Yeah,
confused.
just a
at
hub.
first. Right. Nice. That's brilliant. And it actually works.
It does.
Mine, it's hit or miss. Mac.
Yep.
Great. Okay. Are we okay to sit down already? Or should we wait till after the announcement? I mean, not sit down, but set our stuff.
I think it's actually.
Yeah.
This is our first co-presenter.
And I wasn't sure if we wanted to sit close.
You tell me where you want to sit. Matthew's first, I'm second. You're good.
And yeah.
I love the way you handle that part. Class. As Michael Johnny says, only Memorial. Like, every other university would have like passed this number around. Right? Nice to meet you. I was at Cram. Yeah, I think, yeah. So, it's just, it's a beautiful campus. I mean, founded in 17. Founded in 1775 and 1776 will take care of it. Right? And I'm sitting there. We were founded in 1959. Right? So there's nothing that we can hold a candle to. Except that there's a big there in a beautiful squad. This is square of where these old buildings are around it. And at one point there's water, right? And it's a beautiful there. Like big. Yeah, we were like 30 feet tall. There's one I know higher. Yeah. I mean, beautiful campus. And this is for the national license. So every NSF grant has to have a public statement. And Abby was by his researchers and grants people. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very difficult situation than what we have in Canada. We've signed a number of agreements. Yeah, I said, yeah, and I usually, yeah. No, no. They don't seem to have a focus on because they say don't see the health researchers. They do great basic research, but sort of the patient public engagement, I guess, in this case would be like patient center oriented.
Bridging.
So there's a brief announcement before you guys start.
Great.
An award for our niece has received.
Great.
So as long as you hang around, I'll
Sure.
get you up here. Your PowerPoint, you're not using
I'm all set.
You are set.
Yeah, I'm all set.
You're set? Good. And who else is set?
David is.
David
He's
Phipps.
right there.
He doesn't.
That is exactly what I was going to do. Okay. So you guys can sit nearby. Let them do their thing. Great. Okay. I'll call you up when just don't stray.
What's that? Yeah. I do. It's all loaded, ready to go. I don't think we have. Yes. Thank you. You as well. It was good. It was good. Yeah. 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 Rock.
That would be awesome. CEO of Carnegie Institute of Cram. Nice to meet you, I'm Sheila. Yeah, Southern Labrador. CEO of Carnegie Institute of the Family. Of the family. A lot of people think it's for the family, but it's called the Family Institute. So, ready to go? No, 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 here. You're right, the light here is. Have you ever been? No, it's board. It's on my list. Newfoundland's my favorite place. June and September are my recommended months. Before and after the black. Okay, this will be better. Christina now to provost. Do we need to wait? No, she's here.
Excuse me, could I have your attention, please? It's great to hear all this dialogue and discussion, but just so that we can ensure that we have adequate time for this special presentation, I would like to introduce you to Nora Spink, who is CEO of the Vanier Institute of the Family, to provide a special presentation to us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. The Vanier Institute is a knowledge mobilization, knowledge translation institute based in Ottawa that was set up by the Governor General over 50 years ago, who knew the importance of what it is we're talking about today way back then. And one of the things that the Institute does is bestow honors on people who have made distinguished contributions to our collective understanding across the country. And this year, it is my pleasure to present the Mirabelli Glossop Award for Distinguished Contribution to Drs. Barb Neese from Memorial University here and Dr. Christina Murray from UPEI for their collaborative work on the Move project, and specifically the symposium on families, mobility, and work, which was held in Prince Edward Island earlier this year. So this is quite an honor, and it is, I'm going to read you the specific, presented in recognition of exceptional and sustained contributions to our collective, enhancing our collective understanding of the importance of families in Canada. So it's my pleasure to present the Mirabelli Glossop Award, named after Dr. Robert Glossop, former executive director at the Institute, and his partner, the late Alan Mirabelli, who was also a co-executive director, for their work in knowledge mobilization, knowledge transfer. So Barb, Christina, congratulations and thank you very much. There we go. Thank you. Thanks very much. And a medallion from the Vanier Institute, which is very rare and something historic. So thank you so much. Thank you.
to Barb and Christina on the award. It's great to see that your work is being recognized and honored in this way, and we all join those at Vanier Institute in acknowledging the great work that you do. Congratulations. So our last panel, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So our last panel certainly provided great insights into the challenges and successes of public engagement, both in Canada and abroad. And so we're now going to have a session talking about advancing public engagement. And to chair that session, I'm to introduce someone that I'm pretty certain requires little to no introduction, and that's Rob Greenwood. Rob is the Executive Director of the Harris Center in the Office of Public Engagement, and I'm pleased to say my boss, although he doesn't do much bossing of me, just the same. Yeah, so Rob is, I could stand here for a very long time talking about all of the wonderful work and roles and achievements that Rob has done within his career. But I think it's safe to say that Rob is a champion of knowledge and of collaboration, of regional development, and certainly of public engagement. But he also likes to tell us all that he's a champion of gardening, of fishing, that none of us really believe, but he says it nonetheless, and of berry picking. So I thought I'd share those things that you probably wouldn't know about Rob Greenwood. And Rob, I know, has had a big role to play for many of us in us being here and talking about public engagement today. So Rob, please get us started in the session.
Thank you, Sheila, and it's a great pleasure to have you all here and welcome you. We had for those of you with us last night for the reception, we had a great time, and really delighted with the opening this morning. And I know you're going to be delighted with this session. So we really kind of set the stage with a somewhat global view, certainly in the OECD kind of level, at least in the opening panel. This one is now on advancing public engagement in Canada, drawing on all that we heard there in the first session. It's probably a bit ironic that we actually have someone from the US who's kicking off the session on where do we go in Canada. But the most, and Matthew I'm going to introduce in a second, you'll see he has lots to share with us, but in particular the role with Carnegie. The Carnegie classification for Memorial was really critical when we were developing our public engagement framework. We also used the beacons for public engagement from the UK process. And it really highlights public engagement. And for me, if there's an essence to this conference and our approach at Memorial, it's holistic. It cuts across economic, social, environmental, cultural. There are many elements of public engagement and organizations that focus on particular elements of those. But in my job at Memorial, it cuts across all faculties, all campuses, with all faculty, staff, and students. It also relates to research and teaching and learning. And so I thought the first panel really set that up really well. So Matthew can bring that Carnegie perspective, but also a lot of the other exciting work that they're doing, and some of it looking to come to Canada, which I'm sure he'll speak more about. So Dr. Matthew Johnson is Executive Director, Howard R. Swearer Center for Public Service, and Associate Dean, College for Engaged Scholarship, Brown University. He holds a PhD and MA in sociology, a lot of sociologists around here this morning, from Brandeis University. Faculty member for more than 20 years, Dr. Johnson also holds an appointment as Professor of the Practice in Sociology and maintains an active research and professional academic profile. He co-directs the Carnegie Foundation Community Engagement Classification. He co-founded and now co-directs the National Assessment of Service and Community Engagement with the Siena College Research Institute, and leads the College and University Engagement Initiative at Brown University, an international community engagement in higher education field building initiative. Dr. Johnson is an Ashoka Change leader and leads the ongoing development of the CORDS award-winning social innovation programming in the Swearer Center. I've probably mispronounced several of those names, so you can fix those. There's more on Dr. Johnson in his bio that is on our website, so I encourage you to have a look at that. At the other end of the table is David Phipps, longtime colleague, and really is an amazing champion for public engagement, knowledge mobilization, and Canada internationally. And David manages all research grants and agreements, including knowledge and technology transfer for York University, where I did my master's. Thoroughly enjoyed every minute, except for the winter. No. He asked if I was still donating. He has only intellectual capital. I'm cheap. He has received honors and awards from the Canadian Association of Research Administrators, Institute for Knowledge Mobilization, and the EU-based Knowledge Economy Network. He received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for his work in knowledge mobilization and was named the most influential knowledge mobilizer in Canada. He is the KT, Knowledge Transfer, lead for Kids Brain Health Network and Network Director for Research Impact Canada. And we have lots of exciting Research Impact Network news coming over the next several months, so stay tuned. Michele Nilsson is Associate Professor, Faculty of Education, Simon Fraser University. Michele is an Associate Professor of Education at Simon Fraser, where she teaches organizational theories, reflective practice, and research methods to university and K-12 administrators and aspiring teachers. In the spirit of the open source movement, she and her students created the Compendium of Canadian Post-Secondary Data Sources. She has also worked closely with the Smolik Foundation, United Way Lower Mainland, Surrey Schools, and the Lower Mainland Out of School Time, LMOST Network, to answer critical questions from the field. She was the C2U Expo 2017 co-chair and currently serves as the academic co-chair for the CFICE, Community Campus Engage Canada. And I know she'll be drawing on some of that in her presentation. So Matthew's going to lead us off with 20 minutes and then 10 and 10.
Thank you, Rob. I want to start off this morning by acknowledging that I am impressed by the breadth and depth of the program of MUN. To be a university that spans the entire breadth from sort of vocational and technical education on the maritime and industrial stage to the highest level of PhD education across that entire span, being concerned about issues of public engagement, as is made real in the real bricks and mortar of this building, is quite impressive. That can only happen when you have the support of a leader like Gary. So thank you, Gary, for your vision and your leadership. It can only happen when you have a dedicated set of staff like Rob and his team who made today possible. So thank you to them as well. I also want to acknowledge and thank Ted and Sarah and Kevin from the first panel who hopefully got our minds thinking this morning. I think their comments were particularly insightful, as were the questions. And to also say that I am honored to be on this panel with Michele and David. As we start this morning, though, I want to acknowledge as well, we'll see if this works. Where's our technical support person? Well, you love it when technology works.
John, are we doing something wrong?
There we
John
go.
can make everything work.
All right. So I also wanted to acknowledge and apologize for the noise next door. Took a minute, but you get it, right? The noise and belligerence next door, which does not characterize the vast swath of the country from which I have come today. I miss Canada. My story of Canada is that I started my career as a faculty member at the University of Maine Presque Isle, which is actually north of about 80% of the Canadian population, believe it or not. And most of my media at the time, as a newly minted faculty member, was Canadian media. Most of my shopping was across the border in Canada. I had 2 young children. In the depths of winter, the only place we could play is to drive across the border to the Canadian McDonald's indoor playground. So I miss Canada for lots of reasons. Today, I thought I would spend just a few minutes talking about why Brown is committed to engagement, why Brown has taken on a sort of large role in the US context around engagement, and why Brown is thinking about moving into the international stage around engagement. And I thought I would do so by briefly talking about the strategies we've used for institutional change at Brown as a case study, and then moving out from that to some of the other strategies we're thinking about more broadly. So I am the executive director of the Swearer Center. Howard Swearer was the president of Brown, for whom the center is named. Howard thought that engagement in the outside world needed not be a student activity, which up until that time in US higher education has primarily been thought of as a student activity, a club or an organization or a social activity. For him, engagement needed to be a constitutive part of the learning students do at the university. And so when he founded the center, he founded it within the college as an academic center and charged the center with figuring out how to facilitate undergraduate primarily, and now we've expanded to graduate learning, both inside and outside the classroom as an integrative learning process. Howard was also at the dawn of the birth of Campus Compact. In fact, he and other presidents, 5 other presidents in the US, came together to found Campus Compact, initially as the Project for Public and Community Service at Brown, that then became a national organization across the country. That was sort of a version of the movement that was top down, from presidents on down. Leaders make a difference in how organizations work. But Howard was also the second keynote speaker for the second annual Campus Outreach Opportunity League, which was a student movement across American higher education of engaged students coming together saying they needed the institutions to change as well. So he was keenly aware that this sort of change had to happen from the top and the bottom at the same time. After Howard left Brown, and 3 years after he left, he passed away. Vartan Gregorian was the president at the time, an Iranian immigrant himself. I put up a quote here about libraries, but you could put universities in there as well. This is the way Vartan thought about the role of universities in higher education. And under his presidency, the Swearer Center blossomed and grew. After Vartan came Ruth Simmons. Ruth Simmons turned the university to face its legacy and to think carefully about what that legacy means for the university. For those of you who don't know, the Brown family, for whom the university is named, was the single largest shipping family in New England associated with the slave trade. It was really their shipping company that facilitated most of the slaves, 60% of the slaves that came across the Atlantic came through their slave trade. After her presidency, and most recently, President Paxson joined the university 7 years ago, and she came into the university with an understanding of both the high side of the Brown history as an engaged institution and the more problematic side of Brown's history. But she spearheaded a strategic planning initiative which led to this report, Building on Distinction. And written throughout this new strategic plan for the university was a concept new to the university in word, but not in practice. The concept is engaged scholarship. So quickly, she asked the Swearer Center to imagine what would it take to more fully realize the vision of engaged scholarship at Brown. And we put together over the course of a year our own strategic plan for the center, with these institutional change strategies focused on the curriculum, bringing rigor to the co-curriculum, focused on diversity, inclusion, and equity as a resource, focused on field leadership, and focused on scholarship. What that translates to in terms of organization is a 4-department unit. And this structure is now becoming more and more common across US higher education within centers. A unit that's focused on curriculum, and really they're focused on how do we build into all the disciplines a version of engagement. So for us at Brown, it's called the Engaged Scholars Program. Each department joins the center and we build a pathway through their major or through their concentration that has engaged courses and prepares students to do engaged scholarship. A unit that focuses on faculty engagement, really helping faculty understand what engaged scholarship is, bringing faculty fluency to the table. A unit that is focused on student development so that students understand and move away from a more charity-based model or even more pejoratively, a sort of white savior model towards an engagement and co-creative model. And then finally, a community partnerships unit that is focused on facilitating, building, and stewarding community partnerships. Now, we also chose then as an institution with resources and a set of a real deep feeling of responsibility to turn toward external strategies as well. And I'm going to move forward into some of those external strategies in a moment. But first, we built a whole bunch of programs. And if you go on our webpage, you'll see this is just a sampling now of the more than 25 programs we offer to students and faculty to think about and engage in scholarship of engagement. We involve lots of people in our work now, faculty, scholars from around the world and around our country, graduate students, faculty fellows, etc. We have an online platform, not unlike YAFL. I had to read the sign. Ours is called Brown Engage, where we have partners in the system, projects in the system. We track and orient our community around those projects, and we curate stories about our engagement on our webpage. So I encourage you to go to our webpage and see how this has been all turned into a realized center infrastructure. But we believe that we had to take on the responsibility to do external work as well. And that external work has implications for our internal work and vice versa. So in external work, we're thinking about sector level change strategies across US higher education and beyond. This is the way we think about creating sector level change. Institutional infrastructure and recognitions, assessments and evaluations, co-creation and dissemination. In the infrastructure space, we are working with many institutions. 7 will be selected from Canada in the newly announced, I think the announcement just came out yesterday, for the Canadian pilot of the Carnegie classification. We have 9 institutions on board in Australia, 3 in Hong Kong, 1 in South Africa, 1 in Malaysia, to develop regionally specific versions of the Carnegie classification. And I'll say more about that in a minute. We're also in the recognition space. I was glad to see the recognition just moments ago. I think recognition is incredibly important and is one way to get at cracking the nut of the tenure and promotion obstacles that we face. In terms of assessment, we provide and facilitate national level assessments as well as program and campus level assessments. Right now, we're doing an external assessment for Tulane, for example. For some of you may know, right after Katrina instituted a mandatory service requirement for all of their students across the campus, they're starting to discover some institutional challenges around that and needed an external review. And then in the co-creative space, we have recently announced the co-ownership of a journal with University of Technology Sydney, Gateways, which is one of the top 3 journals in the field. So briefly, the NACI is a study. You can do this on your campus. We have 880,000 students in the sample set, 100 institutions across the US. This is a tool that allows institutions to measure the degree to which they are succeeding in moving students out into the world as part of their education. It measures both frequency, depth, and intentionality among your student body. This is the Gateways Journal I just mentioned that we're hosting with UTS in University of Technology Sydney in Australia. But it's one of a growing cadre of journals dedicated to this in the US. The Journal of Higher Education Outreach and Engagement and the Michigan Journal are just 2 other journals that are out there, and creating a space for faculty to publish on their work. We're also creating a data hub. All of the data that we are now responsible for in terms of Carnegie data, the NACI data. NICE is a tool that all institutions can use for free that measures institutional infrastructure readiness for the Carnegie. The LinkedIn Award, which I'll mention in a moment. Interfaith Youth Corps is in conversations with us. The National Survey of Learning, Voting, and Education, which is run out of Tufts. All of these data sets are either being housed at Brown, or we have articulations agreements with the folks who own them. And our purpose in doing this is to make them all public for researchers in the field to have access to all of this data. Tell your graduate students, great dissertation material here as well. So the Carnegie International Pilot, as I said, is in multiple places around the world. This is the way we imagine the process working. We call it the International Carnegie Project. We will welcome folks into it in different regions of the world, as I mentioned. Each institution in the Canadian cluster will attend a 2 or 3 day kickoff convening at Simon Fraser to learn about the philosophy and logic of the classification and our experience with it in the US context. Each institution in the cluster will complete and submit the current US framework as a process out of which we will work as a learning community to adapt or change the US classification to fit a more clear Canadian set of priorities. We've done this process once before in the Irish context with 11 Irish institutions, and we learned a lot from that process, as did they. And one of the things we learned is that the US framework is not culturally specific enough for different places in the world. So the notion here is that out of this process, that learning community of 7 institutions would fashion their own version of the Carnegie that would then be endorsed by the Carnegie as the Canadian framework. So those campuses that are in that first cohort will be acknowledged as the founding campuses and positioned well to compete in the first official Canadian classification that will come out of that process. Most of this information is in the call that went out yesterday. If you haven't seen it yet, please take a look at it. So I hope that Canadian institutions will participate in the classification. Just to give you a little bit of history, it was founded in 2005. There have been several cycles since then. It's revised every 2 years. The framework's purpose was to bring respect the diversity of institutions, to engage institutions in a process of inquiry, and to honor institutions' achievement. To date, as of the last cycle in 2015, this is what the distribution looked like of campuses who were classified. You can see we have classification processes here that lead to campuses starting the process and not completing the process. That's intentional. That happens in self-reflective processes. You learn through the process. And you can see here we have quite a wide range of institutions who have been classified, all different types and sizes. But at the core of the classification is this definition, which comes in 3 parts. And if you learn nothing else from me today, it would be these 3 pieces of the Carnegie definition I would hope you would take away. The first is about the process of engagement. That engagement describes collaboration between institutions of higher education and their larger communities for mutual benefit. I think we've heard lots of that today already. The second piece of the definition is about the process of engagement. That engagement is a process of partnership, not transaction. Those are actually quite different things. And that the purpose of that engagement for the higher education institution is to improve its central mission of knowledge creation and dissemination. I was talking with some folks this morning. There's so many good things institutions can do out in the community. There's 100 projects we could start tomorrow, thousands of projects we could start tomorrow. The real question for Carnegie is, how do those projects improve the teaching and learning mission and the knowledge creation missions of your institution? And then the third piece of the definition is about reciprocity. That reciprocity is at the heart of both the purpose and process of engagement. That reciprocity requires mutual respect, shared authority, and co-creation of goals and outcomes. Here's a few reasons why campuses in the US have engaged in the classification. Self-assessment, legitimacy, accountability, catalyst for change, and institutional identity. Two propositions that undergird the classification, just briefly. One is that engagement can only happen through institutional transformation. And two is that engagement happens in multiple pathways, as Rob alluded to earlier today. I'm just going to move up quickly to a couple of more graphic slides. So when we think about transforming institutions to make them fully institutionally engaged, we think about and assess institutions on this grid. Is the engagement that the institution is reporting pervasive, and is it deep? And really what we're looking for are institutions that are in quadrant 3 moving to quadrant 4, where engagement is pervasive across the institution and is getting deeper and deeper as you move into more and more engagement. The other graphic we'd like to share with people is this graphic, which helps people understand that when we talk about engagement, we're looking for it at the mission level, we're looking for it at the partnership level, we're looking for it at the pedagogical level, and this one is the hardest one for folks to get their head around often, although I suspect not for folks in this room, the epistemic level. That we're asking institutions to rethink the epistemic grounding of most higher education in the expert model and ask, where is knowledge elsewhere created, held, and contributory beyond just faculty? So the documentation framework for the Carnegie looks like this. We ask a whole series of questions in these categories about identity, assessment, communication, finance, monitoring and tracking, and faculty and staff. Then we ask another set of questions about teaching and learning, the co-curricular space, professional activities and scholarship, and community engagement and other institutional priorities. So Carnegie is one national initiative. Another is the Linton Award. The Linton Award is the pre-tenure award in the US for engaged scholarship that looks at certain domains of knowledge and asks if faculty are thinking about participatory epistemology, collaborative research, scholarly artifacts that are transdisciplinary, that advance scientific knowledge, and activities that contribute to achievement of societally relevant outcomes. The reason I wanted to just mention the Linton is because these awards are very important, and there's a growing suite of awards in the US. The John Saltmarsh Award, for example, which is offered by the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, the Thomas Ehrlich Award, which is offered by Campus Compact, and the newly minted, just given last week at the Consortium for Urban and Metropolitan Universities Conference in Chicago, the Barbara Holland Award for Scholars and Administrators. So this space of awards is a second strategy. A third strategy, I'm almost done. I'm going to run over a bit on time, but I'm almost done. A third strategy I wanted to share with you in the US context are these engaged scholar cohorts. This is a strategy to bring together emerging scholars across institutions and across a region. 10 years ago, Campus Compact did this with 10 emerging scholars. I was fortunate enough to be a part of that original cohort. All 10 of us are in leadership positions in institutions across the US today. All 10 of us have published together. All 10 of us have done engaged scholarship together. This is a second or third national strategy. I wanted to also bring your attention to the movement towards tenure and promotion change. My colleague, Carrie Ann O'Mara, who is at Maryland, it has an NSF-funded project to help departments rethink their tenure and promotion standards around engaged scholarship. But also, Imagining America's Tenure Team Initiative has resources for departments who are rethinking tenure and promotion. And a publication recently by my colleague Tim Eatman in Diversity and Democracy, an AAC&U publication about new scholars and their desire to do engaged scholarship. Finally, I wanted to bring your attention to this paper that is available online. It's a white paper that illustrates if we hope to diversify our faculty and student set, we must change tenure and promotion policies. It was said earlier today. This is a core identity for many historically underrepresented groups, that scholarship needs to be relevant to their communities of origin, and tenure and promotion guidelines need to acknowledge that. Finally, I just wanted to close by letting you know Campus Compact is starting a new process of credentialing professionals in the field. This is for non-faculty professionals in the field, many of the staff who organize this event today, but who do the work in my center and in many centers around the country, to acknowledge the emergence of this professional field as a final strategy I wanted to share with you to think about in the Canadian context. I hope these strategies have been helpful for you to hear about in the US context, and I know we have lots to learn from you as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yep.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to do some brief reflections. I've been doing university engagement since 1996. I've been leading research impact Canada since 2006, researching Canada's network in Canadian universities and the University of Brighton, because we are open to international partners. And we're sharing practices to maximize the impact of research. And to me, public engagement is one of those practices. We've heard a lot about public engagement, but what I'd like to reflect on is why we do this. And I think we do this partly for public trust. So some stats on public trust. So the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2018 released a longitudinal survey of public trust in science, and it's remained steady since 1973. Public trust science more than they trust Congress, more than they trust the press, and more than they trust the banks. They trust the military more than they trust scientists, by the way, and that trust has stayed steady at 40%. 60% of Americans don't trust scientists, but good for them. In Canada, we don't have quite stats on public trust. The Universities of Canada in 2017 did a survey, released a survey, or they then 70% of Canadians feel that universities do valuable research. It's not the same as trust, but it's close. 96% feel that their money, taxes, should be spent on medical research. 90% on climate research, and this is just a snapshot. We don't have that over time. In the UK in 2015, the Medical Research Council published that folks in the UK trust doctors 89% of the time. 89% of the public trust doctors, 79% trust scientists, and 69% trust hairdressers. You get a PhD, you probably postdoc a little bit, you write your shirt, you get a grant application, you publish all your papers for 10% more trust than a hairdresser. But Japan is an interesting cautionary tale. After this is reported in Science in 2012, after the great earthquake and tsunami and nuclear accident that was in March 2011, it induced a crisis of public trust in science. The scientists were seen to be getting all sorts of contradictory advice on divergent evidence-based recommendations on evacuation, food safety, and cleanup. And trust in science dropped from 78% in 2009 to 45% in December 2011, 9 months after the tsunami. So I think public trust is we do have public trust, but it's tenuously held, and we should not be taking it for granted. I think public engagement is one way to help bolster this trust in science. I use the example of Rick Hansen, the Rick Hansen Institute. Rick Hansen, for those of you who don't remember, the guy who wheeled around the world, he has living with spinal cord injury, wheeled around the world, raised awareness and funds for spinal cord injury research and treatment, got a bucket of money from the federal government, and went out and did stakeholder engagement. And he asked clinicians and scientists, what are your priorities? And they said biomarkers and neuroimaging. And then he asked people living with spinal cord injury and their families, and they said bladder control and erectile dysfunction. If we only ask the air quotes experts, you're only going to get part of the story. And so that demonstrates that engagement is a two-way communication. It is not sufficient just to disseminate our research to the public in whatever forms, like the Conversation Canada, which is great, but we also need to listen to the public. And the Rick Hansen story demonstrates that. Monachi Game is a project that uses photographic documentary evidence of the everyday life of people with mental illness in Ghana. They use this as evidence to influence mental health policy and practice that addresses the needs and the rights of people with mental illness. Monachi Ghana used peer supports with the public by collaborating with Basic Needs Ghana, an NGO, and they built trust through engaging these support workers. They also engaged with the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health, and in May of 2012, the Mental Health Act was Ghana's first mental health bill to receive presidential assent and became law. This is as a result of the public engagement that helped inform that. So I use that just as a way of illustrating the public engagement can help build public trust. And to put that in the Canadian context, we've heard about the REF this morning, the Research Excellence Framework. That's not the only country that assesses on impact. The UK does this, Australia does this, New Zealand has the Performance-Based Research Fund, which is moving towards that. And I like to describe those jurisdictions as assessment-driven. Those institutions do impact because they have to, they don't have a choice. Whereas in Canada, with member universities of Research Impact Canada, in the States, the National Alliance for Broader Impacts, there's a project that's over now, but it was development research uptake for sub-Saharan Africa. So how universities and communities in sub-Saharan Africa can do what they call research uptake, which is what we would call knowledge mobilization, how research can become accessible and available to benefit local communities. I call these mission-driven. We're not assessed on what we do with respect to impact. Ted wants us to report on it, but there's not an assessment of that. So we do it because it fits the mission of our institutions. Examples of these missions, one is from MUN, the Public Engagement Framework. Their goal one, Rob, you probably know this, is to make a positive difference in our communities, our province, our country, and our world. It's driven by the mission of the institution, not because we have to do it. At York University, our new president, Rhonda Lenton's vision for the whole university is to provide a broad socio-demographic of students with access to a high-quality, research-intensive university committed to the public good. And it's that public good that is the ethos of the entire university. One example of how we do this at York University is the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. This is led by Stephen Gates in the Faculty of Education with partners, nonprofit and foundation partners and academic partners across the country. Steve sits also as an advisor to Minister Shagger, and he and his research was used to inform the Canadian housing strategy, a $40 billion housing strategy announced by Prime Minister Trudeau in November 2017. And then the subsequent Canadian homelessness strategy that was announced in June 2018. This is research for the public good. So what do we know about how to do public engagement for the public good? We've got lots of methods like community service learning, community-based research, social innovation, knowledge mobilization, all the other KEs, KTs, KTTs, KTEs, and the KMBs. You're going to hear about a lot of those. We know about competencies. We've heard just some competencies. We've got work underway on that. Qualities of practitioners is different from competencies. You can teach competencies, but qualities are who you are. And some of our work on qualities has shown things like being nimble, being diplomatic, being a cheerleader, having tireless enthusiasm, and being a counselor. Someone said with a box of Kleenex, right? Because this work can sometimes draw tears of laughter and of sadness. So, and how do we train for this? So we know that Guelph has an online course for knowledge mobilization. The Hospital for Sick Children has an accredited KT professional certificate. Research Impact Canada has tools and webinars if your if your university is a member of Research Impact Canada, yay Memorial. But my observation is these are all focused on the academic side. Who is training our partners and our patients and our publics to be able to deal with this? In theory, all of our courses are open to the public, but how can the teacher who is working all day in the classroom after school with some extracurricular activities, she's marking in the evenings and on weekends, and she's a mom and she's got elder care, how can she come to even a free course? So how are we doing on the provider side? How are we creating the opportunities for our partners to engage in authentic partnerships, to give them the opportunities to engage as equal partners in this program? So at York's Knowledge Mobilization Unit, one of the things that we did a number of years ago, we had a SSHRC Public Engagement Grant, and we were working with our local United Way York region. Of that $93,000 grant, we transferred $75,000 to the community partner, so that they could manage the money, they could hire the staff, they could lead. They were co-applicant on the grant, and they could leave. And that's one way of helping balance the power differentials. But wait, you might say, I can't transfer money to a non-academic partner. Actually, you can. Ted will tell you that that's a red herring. They can fund it directly as well. And so for the academics in the house, instead of putting your non-academic partner in the partner category, make them a co-applicant. That means they're going to have a SSHRC CV, and I made the SSHRC CV for Daniele Zanotti, the CEO of United Way York Region, because that was my job. was to do that for him so he could become an equal partner into this work. So my message here is that it's not business as usual, that we have to think of doing our work, but doing our work in a way that balances the power differentials between traditional power differentials between the university and community, and to build capacity to help our community participate in authentic partnerships. And that's what these 3 days are for. So I encourage us all to think about how we do business differently by opening up and creating, working hard to balance those power differentials. Thank you.
Mind if I put it on top? Oh, there we go. Thank you. So, oh, what did I do? Messed it up. Boy, that was quick, huh?
You know how to fix it?
Let's see.
Yeah, John is there too.
Okay.
Oh,
There we go. We're back. Great. So David and Matthew have already shared the ways in which we are going to look at the impacts of community campus engagement and the frameworks for determining how those engagements are making a difference in post-secondary institutions and in communities. I'm going to be looking at an emerging body, Community Campus Engage Canada, which is a national body and is coming out of work that has been happening at Carleton University, where I'm co-chair of the Community Campus Engage Canada. It's also been called or referred to as a network of networks. Before I do that, I want to share a bit of the background of the project that led to this development. And it starts with a project that I've only been involved with for the last year, a little bit over a year, but it's been ongoing and is a SSHRC-funded project, and it has been for the last 6 years. And I do this out of deep respect for the work and the others that have shaped and informed my and our thinking as we build this network throughout this process and the work. And I stand on the shoulders of giants, many of whom are still alive today, and some of whom are even in this very room. So this project was started by Ted Jackson at Carleton University is called Community First Impacts of Community Engagement, or SUFFICE. There are just a couple of things that I want to point out about it. First is that it's a 7-year large SSHRC project, and as I said, it's in its 6th year. It was between 2012 and 2019, so it ends next spring. This project is 2-phased, where the first phase consisted of more than 50 action research projects, the topics of which you see here. These were community campus engaged projects that happened across Canada, and they were supported in order to understand the questions that those projects were intended to understand, but they were also intended to help us understand the nature of community campus engagement and partnerships across Canada. Within these research projects, there were 5 research theme hubs: poverty reduction, community environmental sustainability, community food security, knowledge mobilization, and violence against women. With over 50 projects, that's 50 different communities, with 50 different community organizations, at least 50 different academic partners, and hundreds or thousands of students. The second phase was lesson drawing, and we sought to understand the big ideas in the 4 main areas that you see here, working on consolidating what was learned across the projects to determine how to better align post-secondary institutions for being better able to bring partnerships forward with communities for social impacts, to gather and develop a set of tools and practices, many of which are shared on the SUFFICE website still, to share ideas and practices for brokering and successful brokering of relationships between partners and communities that are seeking partnerships with universities as well, so both sides, and evaluation and analysis. The resources that were developed by each of these working groups are freely available, and they're on the SUFFICE website through Carleton University. I'll have the link at the very end, last slide. So these working groups led us to wonder many things. um, we wondered more about what exists across Canada and what is happening in community campus partnerships and how these arrangements varied by community and institution and regions. As was pointed out earlier today, to know campus community partnership is to know one campus community partnership, right? And trying to understand what are some of the commonalities, if they existed across Canada, what made Canadian community campus engagement unique to Canada? What made it different than what was happening in the UK or in the US? And we sought to understand that through holding 8 regional roundtables in May and June this last summer. These were the regional roundtable co-hosting organizations. Our purposes for these roundtables, as I said, was to facilitate regional connections between communities and campuses, to amplify and to showcase the partnerships and the potentialities that were already existing in communities. We also sought to explore what was happening in those communities and what were the gifts or the community assets, what strengths and values united them and were guiding those partnerships. We also sought to understand the challenges and to help them explore the potentialities that exist within their own communities and the networks that exist that could share and learn from each other. We also sought to contribute back to the communities and with this idea of reciprocity, to invite communities to contribute back to the national conversation on community campus engagement and a national framework that was developing towards building a national community campus engaged Canada. Finally, we sought to grow the impact and awareness of community campus partnerships in communities across Canada. There were 8 roundtables in 6 provinces with over 190 participants. These are the various sectors that were represented at, and constituent groups that were represented in the roundtables. This is a photo from the one here at MUN. Might recognize some familiar faces there. So across the roundtables, while each community has, of course, its own unique flavor of community campus engagement, there were several commonalities that we found. I just pulled out a few from our SOAR analysis, looking at the strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and what were the desired results that people wanted within their communities. Here we were looking for what are the commonalities, keep in mind, and what were some of the unique qualities in each of the communities. An example of some of the unique qualities that we found in 2 of the roundtables, I'll share an example. In Brandon, Manitoba, one of their leading community partnerships is in public safety. Meanwhile, in Haliburton County, it's their longstanding partnership with a partnership broker called ULinks. ULinks is existed over the last 30 years, has facilitated thousands of students working with communities there towards ecological sustainability. This fall, these 2 communities, these small rural Canadian communities, through Brandon University and Trent, have connected through webinar to learn more from each other and to share ideas, practices, and resources. There's a great desire to be able to do more of this, to connect across communities that have many similar elements, but are also unique in their own ways. To have a national network for sharing resources, learning from each other, and not having to reinvent the wheel every time a community or a partner or a university wants to start a partnership. My friend and community partner, Dan Marriott at Elmos, the United Way Lower Mainland, describes this as the sweet spot where rubber meets the road and the road meets the horizon, as where community campus engagement really is humming. We're working to build a nonprofit organization that is a network of networks, as I mentioned, that provides a framework for community campus engagement across Canada, which is connected and supports funding infrastructures for students, for communities, for research and researchers. This organization has 4 initiatives: developing the Community Higher Education Roundtable, or SHARE. Do you believe in that? To inform, sorry, I couldn't resist, and share community campus partnerships and practices. at the national level. Right now, there's the business higher education roundtable, but the community and the nonprofit voice is often missing from those conversations. And so the intent is here to bring the community voice back to the national level and to create new spaces for those conversations. The CCE Innovation Fund, we're working with MyTax and several other foundations and nonprofit groups and institutions to develop a fund that is co-governed and co-funded by communities and community foundations, MyTax, and post-secondary institutions. Third, a community of practice. I attended half of the community roundtables, and great things were happening across the campuses and across Canada. But one of the areas that we can do better is to work together to know what's happening, both at our own institutions, what's happening on not only that campus, but within the same campus in a different department, but also sharing our learnings with each other from across sectors and across the entire country of Canada. Finally, we intend to develop a CCE classification and collective impact framework that is holistic and is co-developed with communities. We invite you to join us. There is a bookmark in your bags that contains more information. If you can also find us on the Suffice website through Carleton for now. We're meeting in early November to work on our strategic plan and operational plan, and we'll be rolling out in the spring. We invite you to help us co-create the future that we, as Canadians, want to see in community campus engagement across Canada. And finally, I'd like to thank the students, the partners, the photographers, the group graphic facilitators, the participants, and this committee for the hard work that's been doing. Oh no, oh, there we go. If you're interested in joining CCEC, the contact is Maeve Leiden. Her email address is on the bookmark. My name and my email is there, and the Suffice website and the CCEC website. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michele. And that panel did exactly what we wanted it to do. So good job. We are still streaming live. And if you're watching across Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, the world, you can submit questions to engagement@mun.ca. And I think I have a question here. Also, we have mics in the room, so put up your hand. I'll take note of the order, and we'll get you a mic here at the front right away, and a distinguished gentleman over here. But I'll start with this one. I think this is a question I have here. From the last session. Well, let's see if you can handle this one. I know that the summary for this session highlighted an emphasis on institution-wide approaches to engagement, but I have a question about the individual level. We could also turn to some of our colleagues from the earlier session. What barriers are there to individual faculty members and other members of the university community to pursuing public engagement, e.g. science outreach? What can be done to address those barriers and help or motivate individuals to engage? That's Garrett Richards, Assistant Professor, Environmental Policy Institute at Memorial's Grenfell campus in Corner Brook. Anyone on this panel want to? I think that's one that Matthew looks like he could address.
I guess I don't have a choice. Right?
No,
You're
you've
calling
been
me.
picked on.
I think when it comes to individual faculty barriers, two occur to me right away. One is, of course, the erstwhile questions of what are valued by disciplines and departments and the tenure and promotion process. And we could have a whole conference on just that topic alone. But I think there's another one that is as urgent and actually easier to deal with. And that is training and support of faculty who want to do this kind of work. I think, you know, in the US in the 70s, there was a movement to build writing into higher education as an essential attribute of the undergraduate curriculum. And faculty embraced that idea, but then quickly realized that just because they have a PhD doesn't mean they know how to teach writing or to do assessment research around writing. And so a movement grew up in the US, writing across the curriculum, which today results in most campuses having a writing center with professionals who know how to teach and assess writing in an undergraduate and a graduate context. I think the same is true with community engagement. I think you see it in Campus Compact's recognition and need to credential professionals in the field, that when faculty want to do this work, they often need a set of skilled professionals who can hold relationships, who can help them think about the implications of their desire to do this and to do it in a way that is respectful and utilizing of best practices. I think those are the two obstacles most present in faculty lives.
Thank you, Matthew. I knew you could answer that. And we did have some good discussion on the first panel around promotion and tenure and the like. Michelle or David want to add anything to that on this one? No obligation, but if you want.
I'll just comment on the other side of the equation is our academic leaders are used to academics coming and knocking on the doors and asking for things. It's a different conversation when our partners come and knock on the doors. So how are we creating opportunities for coalitions of vocal supporters of this work from the community to come in and to advocate for this type of work? So it's not all on us, but to welcome that, we have to do some extra work to be able to bring those voices into onto campus so that they can advocate for change as well.
Right on.
Can I just add one point on that, and that is that's another role that those skilled professionals can play. For example, at Brown, we bring together over 100 community partner organizations once a month in our community partner network with the explicit purpose of building their capacity to make demands of the university, so that they can articulate in ways that they can be heard, they can frame their needs in ways that make sense to academics, but also so that they can feel empowered to make those demands of the university as a network.
Right on. Michelle, on this one? Good. And as Noreen mentioned earlier this morning, Sandy and Peter actually did a survey at MUN of faculty and staff on the success, challenges, remaining gaps on our public engagement framework and all the programs we do. And further to Matthew's point, the number one area that faculty said that, and staff, they would like us to help with in facilitating is more training, education, mentoring amongst faculty. And so we're looking at that in a big way going forward. Hey, we had a mic over here and you can introduce yourself and ask a question, comment, be brief.
Yes. Oh, my name is Dana-Lee Baker. I'm from United Way in sort of the middle of BC, and I'm here with Thompson Rivers University. We have a great partnership. So my first question was actually for Matthew. Thank you all for your information. I guess at the beginning, you talked about Paxton's report about community service for students. And I didn't hear like how students were involved. It just went straight to faculty, which I'm sure. I just wanted to know what defines community service and how do the students fit into that classification?
Right. So I want to be clear that it's not, she doesn't use the word community service. We don't use that at Brown. It's engaged scholarship. And so that report resulted out of a year-long process of focus groups with students, with faculty, with staff, with community members around what should be the heart of a Brown education. And two things are most critical in that report. One is that Brown doesn't, although Brown has many resources, Brown does not have the resources of some of the other institutions in the US. So we should make choices. And so we chose a set of issues. One is around brain science, for example, that we would become world leaders in. There's 5. I'm not going to think of them all right now. And the way we would do that is by building interdisciplinary centers around those urgent questions. But as importantly as that issue in the report, the second is the how we do that. And the how was answered through the notion of engaged scholarship, that we would distinguish ourselves as approaching all of those urgent questions in partnership with non-academics, that partnership is the way toward usable answers to the most urgent questions that we face today. And so in many departments now, in 16 of our departments, undergraduates can pursue their disciplinary education in and through an engaged pathway.
Sorry, I just had one follow-up question. I was just curious how many of me are out here? How many students are here or how many partners are here?
Put your hands up if you're not from within the university. Of course. Yes, please.
A quick question for David. We often talk about the need for capacity building in the PE community, and when universities talk about capacity building, they invariably use it in a very self-referential way. The capacity of staff and students to engage with outside partners. But as you pointed out, the key challenge oftentimes is how do we build capacity for our public partners to do public engagement? You mentioned putting them as co-applicants. Ted said that SHIRK is now funding directly. But what else can we do to build capacity? And if I can add to Ted, what percentage of SHIRK grants goes directly to communities? Or what percentage are co-applicants of your total output?
Thank you, Kevin. And Paula, you can keep it there for the other fella in a minute. But first, over to David.
So it's a great question, because how do you swing a nonprofit partner out of 25% of her work? I don't know how to do that. So there's a creative way that I've seen with PrevNet is a network in knowledge mobilization working on bullying prevention. And one way that they've created time for in their community partners is they've actually funded graduate students to be working in the community partner. So the graduate student would be doing work in the community, so work-enabled learning examples. But this is a way of giving resources to the community partner in a way that I thought was really creative. And it also has an amazing impact on the student learner as well. Right. So that's one way that I've seen to be creative about how to, it's building capacity. Oh, and we used some SHIRK money from a Knowledge Impact in Society grant where we were able to fund about 30 graduate students to have summer work-enabled learning experiences. And about a quarter of those were actually picked up and hired by the community partner at the end. So you're now getting a graduate student working in her field of choice. You're getting the community partner who's built capacity to be able to engage in research, and they've hired a resource for that. So that's just some the creative use of for us graduate students. We haven't used undergraduate students We haven't engaged undergraduate students in quite the same way.
Michelle, want in on that one?
Do you want me to wait till after? I guess one of the things I want to just point out is that when we use the word capacity, especially when we're talking about community, we have to be very careful about what do we mean by the word capacity. And thinking about capacity development, are we actually talking about the ability to partner with institutions, or are we talking about the structural supports that might not exist? Because I think there's a deficit potentiality there if we think about stakeholders not having capacity that doesn't necessarily exist. It's that epistemic change that you were talking about earlier that's really important. Like recognizing the capacity that does exist, I think is coming from an asset perspective of what exists in those communities and what structures or supports need to be put into place in order to be able to mobilize those capacities and to be able to work together to build stronger communities.
Goal 3 of Memorial's public engagement framework is meeting our partners where they are and helping address some of the capacity. And some of our funding programs are explicitly to enable those partnerships. And I know others exist elsewhere. Another last question with the time we have remaining, or a comment. Introduce yourself.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Jordan Lawrence. I'm from Gander. I kind of have a few hats on today. I'm an Indigenous descent, as well as working for the Open Door Community Youth Network in Gander. It's kind of a mouthful right now. But just a simple thing building on this capacity idea. As someone from outside the university, we often look at ways to get the community to engage with the institutions. Whereas you guys are obviously looking to get the institution engaged with the community, which works vice versa, I'm sure. But if there's any like tips or maybe success stories or anything like that where you've heard the community members coming to you guys and something actually coming to fruition, sort of thing.
Super, thank you. Anyone? Matthew first.
So this will connect to the last conversation about building capacity as well. In the US, there's a federal, an independent agency that's funded by Congress called the Corporation for National Community Service. It handles all of our domestic volunteer programs, so AmeriCorps, VISTA, the National Conservation Corps, these sorts of things. What started to happen in the late 90s is that individual community-based organizations who would be granted a VISTA volunteer for a year, which is sort of a domestic version of the Peace Corps, to build their capacity as an organization, started to become overburdened by the administrative burden of having a VISTA. So some of them in different places around the country came together and started asking their local higher education institutions to function as an intermediary. And so many institutions in the US now do that, where the institution applies for the resource, the granting of, say, 10 or 15 or as many as 30 slots that are funded by the federal government for this year-long volunteer opportunity. Then the institution of higher education carries all of the administrative burden and then places those members, like the graduate student model, in the community organizations on capacity building projects. So that's one way that communities have made a demand. The other one that's pretty increasingly common is for community space. Since institutions of higher ed often occupy the best spaces in our communities, like this, communities are increasingly across the US making demands on higher education institutions to provide that space for community use. And that's increasingly part of the conversation about tax exempt status in the US as well.
David?
And just two examples of how community can proactively engage. One is Centre LaPointe is from McMaster is developing a platform called the Collaborative, where which is designed to exactly do that. And then just a shout out to YAFL, which community can put their projects into YAFL, and it's a way of proactively engaging with the MUN and the Newfoundland Labrador communities.
Michelle.
Sorry, just to continue this conversation, Suffice is holding a webinar next month on exactly this topic. How can universities and post-secondary institutions be more inclusive of community voices on campus? Sorry?
That will be online.
It's online?
Yep.
It's a webinar. You can go to the Suffice website, CFICE at Carleton University.
And I'm stuck between Sandy's superb timekeeping, which has kept us on schedule. But one last quick question I can't resist. Penny, would you like to briefly pose a question or make a comment?
I want to make a comment. I just want to talk about an innovative practice that the Community Sector Council, Newfoundland and Labrador, used when I was the director of a community university research project funded by SHIRC. We actually provided office space for our academic partners in our organization. So they actually came and were housed at CSC. So we were able to get huge benefit from doing that, well beyond the project we were working on, because the academic experts were sitting in our organization working with all of our staff all of the time on a regular basis. And so it wasn't just us trying to get in on campus, which we'd love to do as well. I haven't quite figured out why we haven't got better partnerships going with us going to the university and the university physically coming out and sitting in our space as well. So I think that's, we had a great experience with it, and it's certainly something that I'd recommend to others.
Wonderful. Great way to end the session. I think
Rob, I'm just going to make out of order, out of line, one quick. My name is Elaine Harris. I want to throw this on the floor and just forget about it. But universities might open up their libraries online to the public. This is a really important way that you could be doing something very simple and very valued for those of us who don't live in cities that have universities.
Thanks, Elaine. No, great point. And I know there's lots of discussion and thought on that, but we'll end now. But loads of ideas, directions for advancing public engagement in Canada. I'm going to turn it back to Sheila to thank the panel. Thank you. Great start and lots of fun to come.
Thank you very much, Rob, and to the panelists for another great session and for sharing your experiences and knowledge on through your work in advancing public engagement in Canada. So I'm on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to present you with a thank you gift, a subscription to the Newfoundland Quarterly, and a gift that has been provided by one of our sponsors, Parks Canada. Thank you all very much.
I hope they're recipes. Right, for the shofar.
So that brings us to a good point in our program, and it smells like we have food in the room, which I'm sure you're all very interested in. But before we get to that, there's something I'd like to do that I failed to do earlier this morning, and that is to welcome everyone that's participating and listening to these discussions online. This is an area that is of particular interest to me, because I think it's really important. Having facilities like this is absolutely wonderful, but it's very, very important that the spaces and the means to connect and be a part of these discussions is bigger than our rooms. So I'd like to say welcome to everyone who's watching online, and I'd ask the room to join me in showing our welcome to everyone who might be joining us. So the food, I believe, is here. So today's luncheon, is a mentor's lunch. Which means that we have a mentor that's been assigned to each of the tables in the room. You're free to choose whichever table you'd like to sit at after you've collected your food. And I remind all of the mentors to find your table and be available to continue this wonderful dialogue and discussion about public engagement. So get your food, enjoy the discussion, and we'll see you at the end of lunch.